This area might just be the most important spot in America right now, as it is worth over $1 trillion. There's something incredibly valuable hidden right here at Thacker Pass, and it is going to shake things up, not just in Nevada, but in the US economy and its global relations. The McDermott Caldera is a massive area, about 28 miles long by 22 miles wide, stretching across northern Nevada and southern Oregon. It's in Humboldt County, a quiet, rural place with just one main city that's going to change a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. That's because they found white gold there. We're talking about lithium. And to explain why this metal is so important, we need a scale. On one side, we place a chunk of lithium, and on the other, an apple. What do you think will happen? If both have the same volume, the scale is going to tip toward the apple. That's because lithium is super light. Its density is about 0.3 ounces per cubic inch, which makes it the lightest solid you can find at room temperature. Lithium is also extremely reactive. That means it combines with other elements very easily, and it can catch fire just as easily. Mix it with water, fire. Expose it to air, yep, fire again. But when you combine its lightness with its high reactivity, you get a material that's perfect for batteries, like the one powering your smartphone, laptop, or even your electric car. Nevada's been hiding this treasure for about 16 million years. The McDermott Caldera used to be a volcanic hotspot, spewing molten rock and creating a huge lake filled with mineral-rich waters. Over time, that lake dried up, leaving behind thick layers of clay loaded with lithium. Right now, Thacker Pass Mine is sitting on one of the biggest untapped lithium reserves in the world, worth about $1.5 trillion. If everything goes as planned, they expect it to produce about 40,000 tons of high-quality lithium a year. And that's enough to make batteries for up to 800,000 electric cars. Like I mentioned earlier, this metal is the backbone of modern batteries. And with the world racing toward green energy, the demand for lithium is skyrocketing. Since 2020, its price has gone up more than 10 times, making it the most expensive battery metal in the world. That means it's way more expensive than magnesium, nickel, cobalt, and other materials used in rechargeable batteries. Right now, we're using about 1.16 million tons of lithium per year, and roughly 85% of it goes into making batteries, mostly for cars. Between 2030 and 2040, experts think we will need to double the money we're putting into production, from $94 billion to $188 billion. At the same time, investment in batteries will jump by over 200%, reaching $686 billion. Finally, by 2050, the demand for lithium is expected to be more than 10 times higher than what we're producing now. Sorry, I know that's a lot of numbers, but I just want to show how important Thacker Pass will be for the whole world. This mine is going to be key to keeping everything running. I mean, literally, since most of the future demand will be for things like cars, electric bikes, scooters, and renewable energy storage. Nevada could also be the epicenter of a global energy revolution, with the US aiming to cut pollution by 50% by 2030. A big part of that is replacing gas-powered vehicles with electric ones. And to make that happen, America is going to need a whole lot more lithium than it's producing right now. Nowadays, most of the metal used in the United States come from countries like Chile and Argentina. So if America wants to be a leader in this market, it really needs to invest more and more in projects like Thacker Pass. But there's another challenge. Finding lithium in a mine is one thing, but refining it is another story. Just like diamonds are carefully cut and shaped to bring out their sparkle and sold in rings and necklaces, something similar needs to be done with lithium. The raw material that comes from the mines has to be refined into a pure form that can actually be used in things like batteries. And China pretty much dominates this part of the market, and they're responsible for about 75% of global lithium-ion battery production. In other words, it doesn't matter if a country finds this powerful metal on its land, it will probably still need China to help refine it. So, the US is eager to strengthen its supply chain. In fact, they're so excited about this possibility that authorities have invested over $2 billion in loans into the Nevada project. Because of that, Thacker Pass could make the US a leader in lithium production worldwide. If their estimates are right, the McDermott caldera could hold nearly half of the world's known lithium reserves. It would almost double the reserves found in Bolivia's salt flats, for example, which used to hold the record for the world's largest deposit. This discovery is about to change Humboldt County for good. Those quiet streets surrounded by nature will never feel the same again. The mine will need about 2,000 workers who will probably move there from other cities. Those workers will need houses, hospitals, schools for their kids, and all the necessary services. Do you see how it's like a ripple effect? For every person hired to work on the project during construction, 6 more people will get hired in the state to support them. Thacker Pass is also going to have a huge impact on the economy, not just in Nevada, but all across the country. People expect the mine to be active for 35 years, and each year it's expected to generate over $2 billion. But here's the thing. In Thacker Pass, they'll be extracting lithium from clay, and this process has never been done on such a huge scale before. So it's kind of a hit or miss. But if it works, it could completely change the industry. Big question. Who's interested in all this? Well, we've got 3 big companies eyeing the lithium market in the US. First, there's ExxonMobil. The oil giant wants to start producing lithium by 2027, and they have plans to become the top supplier for electric vehicles by 2030. Then there's General Motors, the company behind big car brands like Chevrolet and Cadillac. They're so interested in this business that they agreed to pay $625 million for a 38% stake in Thacker Pass. And finally, Tesla. In 2023, they started building a factory in Texas to process lithium. It's all part of their plan to handle more of their supply chain themselves. Now that you know how important lithium is, you might be wondering, what if we run out? Well, that could happen, since it comes from mining and, just like gold, is a finite resource. But that doesn't mean we'd have to give up smartphones or electric cars. If we ever run out of this metal, we'd probably find new ways to produce batteries. In fact, some experts think thermal batteries could be the next big thing. They store extra energy from renewable resources like wind or solar power, which are very cheap. So they represent a new way of storing energy at a small fraction of the cost. Nowadays, they're primarily used for powering the production of steel, cement, and chemicals. Thermal batteries are also being used to heat and cool large buildings. However, more and more projects are focusing on bringing this technology into private spaces, like houses and apartments. Experts are optimistic that initiatives like these could make thermal batteries as well known as electric batteries, and they might soon become a regular part of our daily lives.
China plans on building a train that will connect mainland China to the United States. The track will start in the northeast region and then make its way through Siberia in eastern Russia. It will then go under the sea through the Bering Strait into Alaska in the US through a 125-mile underwater tunnel. It will then flow across Canada's Yukon Mountains and British Columbia and finally to the United States. And once there, it can connect to every major train station in America. The total distance, around 8,000 miles. This China, Russia, Canada, and US network was conceived in 2014 by a group of Chinese engineers who had a vision of a major transcontinental train track. They claim that if the project is built, then you will need just 2 days for a trip from China to America without having to go to the airport. A train ride is much smoother than a plane and offers people better opportunities to experience traveling near the ground rather than up in the air. And the trip itself can boost tourism across 4 countries. Even though a plane ride from China to the US takes just 14 hours, depending on where you're coming from, anyone will get to experience the joys of looking out of the window and seeing yourself whisk through the land. This new rail system will be 1,800 miles longer than the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which is the longest railroad in the world, and the tunnel itself will be 4 times longer than the English Channel. If the project gets the green light, then it would cost a total of $200 billion. Building on the main surface won't be so much of a hassle and won't be as challenging as one would expect. But the tunnel in the Bering Strait will require many skilled and experienced engineers to construct it. And they have already figured out how they're going to do it. It will be divided into 3 levels with 2-way traffic. The upper level will accommodate the high-speed trains, while the bottom level will be for the slow-moving cargo and passengers, while the middle level will be reserved for emergencies. The cargo train can move up to 100 million tons of cargo, which makes up 8% of the world's freight cargo between Europe, Russia, China, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and the United States. Passengers wanting to leave from Alaska to Russia and vice versa will only have to take a 20-minute high-speed train ride to their destination. The tunnel alone in the Bering Strait will cost around $35 billion. From start to finish, it could take anywhere between 12 to 15 years to complete. The project will involve many international firms and construction companies to help out with completing it. This could possibly be the most expensive project in history if funded properly. And it has to be strong enough to handle the icy waters in the Bering Strait and the strong waves around. The China, Russia, Canada, America railway line would be the most expensive and ambitious mega project in history and would take years to complete. But according to some resources, China is confident that they have the technology necessary to do something of this scale. It will change the transportation industry forever and increase tourism across all continents. If this project is going to be built, then it would be technically possible to travel from a train station in Portugal all the way to the United States. Europe has an impressive train network that's all connected to each other. From Eastern Europe to Central Asia, you could take a train from certain countries until you end up in China. For the past 20 years, China's speedy rail network has grown incredibly. It has the world's largest high-speed rail network that covers more than 23,000 miles. Based in Shanghai, it's also the fastest commercially operating train, which reaches speeds up to 270 miles per hour. So once in China, you can get on any train and speed off to wherever you want to. It will be the ultimate traveling experience to only travel by train from continent to continent. There won't be any need to travel by an airplane. So if you have fear of flying, let's say, then this will be the perfect way for you to go by. But building train tunnels underwater isn't easy. The best engineers have to figure out all the risks beforehand. The Channel Tunnel, for example, is an underwater train that takes you from London to Paris in just 2.5 hours at cruising speed. The train is highly equipped with the most advanced technology in the market to ensure comfortable travel. If you have any work to do, then you can just pop open your laptop and connect to the Wi-Fi. Want to take a break? Just head to the cafe for a quick drink and enjoy the lounge feel and the great beverages. And if you feel like watching a movie or catching up on your favorite TV series, then the train offers that too. You won't feel the time pass since you can just relax in luxurious leather seats in business premier class. Train travels at around 186 miles per hour and is considered to be the world's longest underwater tunnel, considering that most of it is submerged. The tunnel itself is 31 miles long and costs $6.3 billion. It began construction in 1988 and was completed 6 years later in 1994. It was considered to be one of the 7 wonders of the modern world, in line with the Empire State Building in New York, or the Panama Canal, or the San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. And just like the China to US Dream Project, this tunnel also has 3 tracks, 2 used for trains and a smaller one for emergencies. Each shuttle is 2.5 thousand feet long and needed 13,000 employees to construct it. Even though many people got to visit the City of Love in Paris and the multicultural hub of Europe in London, the channel is also used for import and export. According to some reports, 26% of traded goods travel between the UK and the rest of the Europe each year using the tunnel. China approved the first underwater speed train from the port of Ningbo near Shanghai to Zhoushan, which is a group of islands on the east coast of China. The brand new railway will stretch for around 50 miles, with a decent part of it built underwater. What makes it cooler is that the train will rely on a magnetic track where the train cabins will float in the air on the tracks and speed away. If this project becomes a reality, then it will most likely feel like riding in a royal carriage. You can book cabins and rooms with multiple bedrooms and accommodations. You'd be treated like a guest of honor at any ceremony. Constant entertainment and food are yours all day long. Ticket prices may vary, but still be expensive, so not everyone could afford it. There's high-speed Wi-Fi, of course, in all areas, with some of the best seats in the world. It will be possible to live in Europe and work in Asia without flying. Even living in Russia and working in Alaska can be a reality. And if you were in the US, you can also remain on the ground and still get to London via the network. And once you reach Europe, you'd have to take the train to Paris and then the channel to London. But there hasn't been any news on the project so far. It hit an economic wall and is still in the conceptualizing stages. Many critics didn't hold back on how this project could not revolutionize the transportation industry, but might instead sink it into more debt. They claim that cargo ships and flights are just as good and a lot cheaper, so there's no need to put such large amounts of money for something that maybe only a handful of people can use. Moving cargo through trains won't necessarily be as fast as planes or ships. If this train network replaces shipping and flights, then many people who work in aviation would have to change jobs and move on to trains. Of course, something like this wouldn't happen overnight and would probably take decades. This project might even open doors for countries in Asia and Africa to build mega network speed trains all connected to each other. You might one day travel by train from South Africa all the way to the United States, passing through Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, China, Russia, and eventually the US. And if the train network expands even more, it can reach all over South America, which would make your trip even longer. It could reach every continent in the world except Antarctica. Imagine a worldwide railway network of high-speed trains connected to every station on Earth.
In some ways, the United States is a whole different world, totally different from every other place. So let's take a look at what's normal there that baffles people from the outside. One of the first things a foreigner notices when entering the country is flags. American flags everywhere. On buildings like schools and houses, and on clothes like shorts, t-shirts, you name it. Throughout history, Americans have changed 27 flags. The current American flag was only adopted in 1960 and is so far the longest-lasting flag of the country. It wasn't created by the authorities, though. In 1958, there was a contest for a design of the new American flag, and the winning flag was made by a 17-year-old high school student from Ohio. The reason why Americans love their flag so much is national pride. But why not so many countries do the same? Well, some countries avoid displaying them for historical reasons. Other countries only raise the flag on special occasions to highlight the importance of the event. Still, some countries display their flag as often as Americans do. In Denmark,
people are quite proud of their flag too. They decorate the winter holiday tree and birthday cakes with them, and you can always find stickers with Danish flags, red and white candles, and other goodies with the flag in a grocery store. People in Sweden are also very much into their flag and have flagpoles everywhere. Now, let's go to a restaurant, shall we? Many things there are very specific to the States. Like, for example, tons of ice in every drink. Turns out there is some history to this preference. America has always had a lot of ice as a resource, since New England's lakes and rivers have a lot of those during winter. Centuries ago, before refrigerators and other helpful cooling machines, that kind of cold resource was very valuable, and the States started exporting ice to other parts of the world. And also, of course, consuming it themselves. They started to put ice in their hot drinks, in contrast to the British, who were always drinking their beverages hot. The ice in the drinks has become an American thing, and it was also considered a rich person's drink. Yep, the ice would also show a person's status. Of course, with time, when refrigerators appeared, ice became available to everyone, and Americans started to add it to their drinks commonly. The habit remained, but also, ice drinks are very refreshing, which is especially important in the hot south of the country. But if you come from abroad and don't want your drink freezing cold, always specify it to the waiter. The next striking thing is the huge portions that are served, and there is a reason for that too. It wasn't always like this, but in the second half of the last century, due to pesticides and fertilizers, farmers started to be able to grow more food than they used to. The government caught on, subsidizing them to grow even more food. So, the amount of available food increased. Over time, companies started to increase the sizes of their portions. Why serve less food and get less money if you can serve a bit more and also charge more? That's good for business, and it's a win-win. Customers get more food for just a little bit more money. So, larger portions stuck. Okay, now we need to take a little toilet break. And, surprisingly, there are a lot of foreigners who find American toilets weird. First, what's up with those huge gaps in bathroom stalls? Let's start with the more obvious part, gaps on the bottom of the doors. Those are quite common, even outside the US, and they serve several purposes. First, you can see if there's a person inside without trying to break into an occupied stall. Second, it provides some ventilation and makes it easier to clean the floor in the bathrooms. The gaps on the sides are more questionable. Of course, people on the outside can't see everything going on behind the door, but still, there's not much privacy whatsoever. In most other countries, the gaps are either negligible or non-existent. So what's up with them in America? I did some research. Some sources say that since every inch of material is expensive, wide gaps are made to reduce the costs of bathroom stalls. Other sources say that when people feel exposed like this, they have fewer incentives to do something illegal in public bathrooms. Next observation, American toilets have way more water in their bowls in comparison to, for example, European ones. The reason is that those types of toilets use different flashing systems, and an American one needs more water to flush effectively. In many countries, especially in Asia, most bathrooms have bidets, which are used for after-toilet cleaning, and tourists don't understand why Americans wouldn't adopt those too. After all, if you step in mud, you'll go and wash your foot instead of just wiping it off with a tissue. The same logic works here. Also, it reduces toilet paper usage. So, it's more sustainable and it's environmentally friendly. Some say there's a strong stigma in America around bidets that is extremely hard to overcome. Others say that toilets in the US don't have enough room to install a bidet, so they don't have those, especially if there are other well-known ways. Before we leave the restaurant, we need to tip the waiter. Tipping in the United States is way more common than in most other countries. You're expected to tip any service person who helped you with something. While some kind of tipping exists in some other countries, the extent of it is smaller. And there are also countries like Japan and Denmark where tipping isn't a thing at all. Those countries have minimum wage laws that dictate decent wages employers must pay their workers. This way, the need to pay money to service stuff isn't pushed onto the customers. By the way, here's one more fact about the prices. Probably the craziest thing in the States tourists have to adapt to are prices in stores. The tax isn't included into the displayed price and is added on top while checking out. So people who are short on money can't pre-calculate the price they will have to pay to make sure that they have enough money. But really, why is it so? The main reason behind such a weird policy is transparency. This way, taxpayers know how much tax they pay and can resist raising the tax rate in case it comes on the national agenda. Also, it allows buyers to compare the costs of products across states fairly, since tax rates may differ. So, if the tax isn't included, you compare the actual bread costs between Alabama and Alaska, for example. In some places in America, it's not very easy to get around unless you travel by car. In some regions, there's often no sidewalk taking you to the closest convenience store or a crosswalk, allowing you to cross the road right in front of the store. The main reason for that is probably the fact that the United States is a big country with vast lands and everything is spread out. Neighborhoods can be scattered around, wide suburban territories quite far away from one another, so that's already far from being walking distance, and sidewalks aren't needed because, yes, no one's walking. Studies show that Spanish or Germans walk at least twice as much as Americans, but in those countries, everything is way closer. And last and not least, you guessed it, the imperial system. It's based on the human body. A foot is an average foot size of a person, so you might think it's quite intuitive for anyone. Well, no. Foreigners are incredibly confused with feet, inches, gallons, and Fahrenheits, and tend to convert it all to the familiar metric system. Well, in this sense, the British are even more confusing. Those guys use both imperial and metric systems. For height, it's mostly feet and inches, but for weight, kilograms. Great Britain used to have the imperial system, but later they were forced to switch to the metric system. So now, they're using a combination. Whatever helps to be more precise.
The floor is lava. Haha, just kidding. But honestly, it's kind of falling apart. You might not feel it yet, but a huge part of North America has already lost 37 miles worth of rock from its foundation. And no, this isn't about earthquakes or giant sinkholes. It's about the continent losing pieces of the very thing that keeps the ground from wobbling around like a bad carnival ride. A team of researchers has just dropped a geological bombshell. Part of North America's ground is thinning out like a very sad, very slow ice cream drip. How do they know? They basically gave Earth a high-tech full-body MRI and created 3D maps showing how rocks once considered indestructible are now melting away into the planet's guts, like an upside-down cheese pizza inside an oven. But to really understand this mess, you first have to meet my old friends, cratons. Cratons are like the roots of the continents. They're thick, tough, and ancient. We're talking billions of years old. These bad boys survived meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, and even the tectonic movement of plates. If the plates got into fistfights, for example, you can bet we would see mountain ranges being born. If they got a divorce, drifting apart from each other, then a whole new ocean would be born. All of these things leave scars on the surface of Earth, but the cratons seem to always remain unfazed, like the cockroaches of geology. And since a craton can basically get punched in the face and feel nothing, scientists always assumed these things were nearly indestructible. But then, a group of researchers took their fancy machines to the test and realized that, wait, the cratons are falling apart? How? Enter the Farallon Plate, a really ancient tectonic plate that started to slide under North America's major plate over 100 million years ago. This is a pretty normal process, actually. It's called subduction, and it's how Earth recycles rocks and keeps itself from overheating. This subduction thing has been happening for so long that, by now, the Farallon is almost 400 miles away from the craton, sitting pretty chill at the lower mantle, weirdly close to the outer core of our planet. But the Farallon has been causing trouble, like that one roommate who moved out but keeps leaving weird stuff in the fridge. You see, as it sinks, it tugs on the bottom of North America's foundation, stretching it out and causing pieces to fall off into the deep mantle. And if that wasn't enough drama, the sinking Farallon has also leaked water and carbon dioxide into the surrounding rocks, making the craton even softer and easier to shred apart. Thanks, Farallon. Very cool of you. By studying hundreds of earthquakes across thousands of monitoring stations, scientists have confirmed the story. Big chunks of continental material are dripping downward, thinning the craton by as much as 37 miles. That's more missing rocks than can fit into a milk carton. Sounds dramatic, right? But don't worry. This is happening at a snail's pace. It'll take millions of years for anything noticeable to happen. Your great-great-great-great few grandkids from the distant future might still be standing on solid ground. But don't get too comfy. This thing may not be an urgent problem, but there's another type of sinking that's happening faster than you can say, "Help." Here's the thing. By 2050, at least 32 major cities in the US, including New York, Baltimore, and Charleston, could be partially underwater. And guess what? This one is mostly our fault. Scientists noticed that since 2007, some cities have been sinking into the ground between 0.04 and 0.08 inches every year. Charleston, in South Carolina, is pulling ahead in the worst way possible, sinking 0.15 inches annually. Sure, these numbers sound tiny and a bit ridiculous, but Charleston is barely 9 feet above sea level, and a little sinking goes a long way when the ocean is breathing down your neck. On really bad flood days, people there have to abandon their cars and basically swim home. This whole phenomenon is called land subsidence, and when you mix sinking land with rising sea levels, you get a disaster cocktail of flooded streets, salty farmland, ghost forests, and a lot of very cranky homeowners. And it doesn't stop with just homes. Infrastructure like bridges, roads, airports, and power plants, all things we rely on daily, are also at risk of serious damage. Flooded electrical grids and sunken highways could cause billions more in economic losses and create major safety hazards for communities. Now, let's be fair. Not everything is humanity's fault. Some of this trouble dates all the way back to the Ice Age. About 12,000 years ago, massive ice sheets covered the northern US. They were heavy, like seriously heavy. The weight pushed the land down, and when the ice melted, the ground didn't just pop back up like a trampoline. Instead, it started playing a weird game of geological seesaw. The places that were squished started rising, and the places that weren't got pulled down. This whole process, called glacial isostatic adjustment, try to say that 3 times fast. But of course, humans found a way to make it worse. Groundwater extraction is a major culprit. Think of it like pulling the stuff out of the mattress. After a while, the whole thing just sags. In places like California's Central Valley, the land is dropping by up to 8 inches a year because we keep pumping out water during droughts. In cities like New York, the problem isn't just water. Skyscrapers themselves are making it worse. Yep, turns out if you stack millions of tons of concrete and steel onto soft ground, it tends to flatten. And in case you're wondering, the total mass of New York City's buildings is around 1.68 trillion pounds. That's about the same as 3.5 million statues of liberty piled up. With so much weight concentrated over a relatively small area, the underlying soils have no choice but to compress over time. And if you thought it couldn't get messier, think again. We've been building dams, which stop rivers from delivering fresh sediment to coastal areas. That sediment is kind of like Mother Nature's way of fluffing the ground back up. Without it, coastal lands are compacting like an old sponge. Plus, when wetlands are drained for agriculture or construction, the peaty soil dries out and collapses. Honestly, It's like the ground just can't catch a break. Scientists also noticed that the areas that used to be lush wetlands are now among the fastest sinking spots in the country, especially along the Gulf Coast. Louisiana, for example, is losing about a football field of land because of this mix of subsidence and rising seas. So what's the end game here for us regular people who just want to live above sea level? Well, it's not looking great. Ghost forests, which are basically drowned woodlands, are popping up. Farmland is turning salty and unusable. And even sunny day flooding, where streets flood without any rain, is becoming a thing. Yikes! Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, California is not exactly winning either. San Francisco and Los Angeles are both sinking, which means that rising sea levels could hit them twice as hard and twice as fast. In some places, like the Palos Verdes Peninsula, the ground has been sinking so fast, people over there might as well live like moles. So, is America turning into the next Atlantis? Probably not next week, but without serious action, like cutting back on groundwater pumping and planning smarter cities, at least 500,000 people are in serious danger. And the housing damage could easily rack up a jaw-dropping $109 billion by 2050. In the end, while North America isn't about to sink like a poorly made souffle, it's definitely showing some cracks in the crust. So maybe let's ease up on groundwater pumping, rethink how and where we build, and invest a little more in keeping our feet dry. After all, if the floor really does become lava someday, we're gonna wish we had at least fixed the leaks first. See how the Antarctic Peninsula looks just like South America, but upside down? This isn't just a coincidence. It's the ghost of a 30-million-year-old breakup. These continents were once connected, but their divorce gave birth to an ocean current so powerful, it was capable of completely freezing Antarctica and shaping its landscape. Here's how it went down. Tectonic plates pulled a sneaky move and cracked open a ridiculously narrow passage in the ocean, about only 500 miles wide, forcing 4.5 trillion cubic feet of water to flow inside this geological straw. This was the birth of an ocean current stronger than the Amazon River. This ocean current, called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, by the way, flows in a circular motion, going clockwise because of the strong winds that blow over there. This circular motion around Antarctica caused erosion, shaping the landmass of the continent into a circle, except for that stubborn peninsula, which is being slowly dragged east like a kid refusing to leave a playground. Wait, South America and Antarctica used to be one? Yep, a long time ago. South America, Australia, and Antarctica were all part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, which also included Africa at some point. Back then, South America and Antarctica used to be basically joined at the hip by a land bridge called the Antarctic Land Bridge, which just so happened to be a lush green forest and also a great dinosaur highway. Yeah, you heard it right. Dinosaurs. A 95-million-year-old dino, whose name I can't pronounce, sorry, was discovered in Australia, and scientists found out it had actually been a distant cousin of Argentina's Sarmientosaurus. Same jaw, same chiseled teeth, same everything. These guys were like identical twins, separated by an ocean. How? Because back then, Antarctica wasn't a frozen wasteland. It was a temperate rainforest, like Oregon, making it a pretty nice travel route for a dino family. But the land bridge wasn't just for dinosaurs. About 40 million years ago, the ancestors of Australia's marsupials waddled to the land down under all the way from South America, taking the Antarctica route, another proof that these continents used to be connected. Things remained somewhat peaceful for the dinos and the marsupials until Earth's ground started moving. This is what a German scientist called the continental drift theory, back in 1912. Our German friend here basically looked at the coast of South America and went, "Hey, this looks like it could fit into the coast of Africa." Like a scientific Sherlock Holmes, he noticed what others had overlooked for centuries. The continents were clearly pieces of a larger puzzle. And he was right. Here's the deal. Planet Earth is made of many layers of rocks and metals, like a cosmic onion, The outermost layer, the lithosphere, is divided into pretty solid tectonic plates that move atop a layer of softer, somewhat molten rocks, like slippery ice. This is why the plates move. In fact, they've been rearranging Earth's face for billions of years, with supercontinents forming and breaking apart in cycles, like a slow-motion game of bumper cars. This movement might be pretty slow since most tectonic plates only move 0 to 3.9 inches every year, except for the Nazca Plate, racing ahead at 7.8 inches, about as fast as your hair grows. But don't let their snail's pace fool you. These shifting slabs are the ultimate planet shapers. Their slow dance gives us everything from earthquakes that build mountains, like the Himalayas, to rifts that birth oceans, like the Atlantic. All because the oceanic crust is dense and sinks like a stone, while continental crust floats like a cork. It's this density difference that explains why continents exist at all. Without it, Earth would be completely covered by shallow seas. This slow-motion planetary renovation project is exactly what tore South America and Antarctica apart 30 million years ago. The plates under these continents started to drift apart in a process called crustal extension. It's like the lithosphere was pizza dough being slowly stretched until it thins and splits. As the crust stretched, it became thinner and weaker, eventually cracking like the surface of a drying lake bed. This whole thing gave birth to a new tectonic plate, the Scotia Plate, that emerged between South America and Antarctica, like a geological divorce lawyer. For a while, parts of this plate stayed above water as the last gasp of the Antarctic land bridge. It was Earth's version of that one thread still connecting your hoodie after the zipper breaks. These final connections might have persisted as chains of islands, but just like that fraying hoodie, the connection couldn't last forever. Eventually, this small but mighty plate became the final nail in the coffin of the land bridge connecting the two continents. Just like all the tectonic plates, this one was also on the move. As it expanded eastward, it opened a new passage of water called the Drake Passage, slowly covering the Antarctic land bridge with ocean water. The process was like pulling open elevator doors. At first, just a crack, then wider and wider until the connection was completely broken. This geographical divorce had chilling consequences. The new Drake Passage allowed the Antarctic circumpolar current to form, creating an endless loop of cold water that isolated Antarctica, shaped its land, and even cooled the entire planet. This current acts like a wall around Antarctica, blocking warm water and invasive species while regulating global climate. Eventually, Antarctica turned into an icebox that is 98% covered in ice sheets, and that holds about 61% of Earth's fresh water. Nowadays, this continent holds the title of the windiest, driest, and iciest place on Earth. It's a frozen desert where temperatures plunge below -128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze your breath mid-air. A layer of ice there can be more than a mile thick, and it expands even further in winter to cover an area larger than the continental United States. Today, if you want to travel to Antarctica, the quickest sea route is through the Drake Passage, a 500-mile-wide body of water that is narrow enough for the winds to scream across thousands of miles, transforming into monstrous waves that can tower up to 49 feet, though calm days create waves only 13 to 16 feet high. Still twice as tall as Atlantic waves, mind you. This is probably why sailors call this stretch of ocean the Drake Shake. But tectonic movement isn't just about shifting continents. It's Earth's ultimate life support system. You see, about half of our planet's heat comes from radioactive decay in the core. Thanks, uranium-235. Something like nature's nuclear reactor. This heat is behind everything from volcanoes to the very plate motion that once connected Antarctica to South America. And it only comes out of the core because of tectonic movement. Without this internal heat engine, Earth would be just like Mars. When the plates move and release heat, they also release CO2 gases into the atmosphere, regulating the temperature of our planet. And when the plates move underwater, they take a lot of this CO2 back to Earth's interior, recycling all this gas. This is why the plates can change our air, climate, and even the evolution of life itself just by moving around. But billions of years ago, these plates were not moving around. Back then, it was like Earth was wearing a solid ceramic shell with many cracks. But even without tectonic movement, the heat managed to escape through these cracks in a process called stagnant lid tectonics, kickstarting all life on Earth. And no, tectonic movement is not a thing of the past. Earthquakes are the living proof that it is not just happening today, but might repeat again on a more dramatic scale in the future. You see, to form supercontinents like Pangaea, smaller megacontinents have to dive beneath another. And scientists predict that a similar process might create a new supercontinent called Pangaea Proxima in 250 million years. By then, humans might be extinct or living on Mars, but Earth's tectonic dance will continue, even without us. Not bad for something that moves more slowly than a traffic jam. Turns out, Antarctica and South America used to be BFFs before all that tectonic drama split them up, like a messy breakup that literally froze one of them out. Now, they just awkwardly mirror each other from across the Drake Passage. Classic exes. There's a mysterious dent in our planet's magnetic field, and it's slowly growing. It stretches from South America to Africa, and what's horrifying is that it's weakening Earth's protection shield against the sun. They call it the South Atlantic Anomaly. And while most people on Earth don't feel its effects for now, satellites and spacecraft passing through it already do. Deep inside our planet, there's a giant ball of molten iron and nickel, the outer core. The metal inside is so hot that it's constantly moving and swirling. This movement creates electrical currents, and when electricity flows, it generates a magnetic field. This field surrounds the entire planet like a protective bubble. Without it, life on Earth would be in serious trouble. The sun blasts out charged particles called solar winds that could destroy our atmosphere over time. Luckily, the magnetic field deflects most of these particles, keeping us safe. Other planets without magnetic fields like Mars lost their magnetic fields, got their atmospheres stripped away, leaving them dry and lifeless. And also, without the magnetic field, our technology and equipment gets all messed up. Satellites, power grids, and even airplanes could get hit by intense radiation. This would lead to communication failures, GPS errors, and blackouts. And now, something strange has been going on underneath the African continent. An enormous blob of dense rock deep inside the Earth, called the African Large Low Shear Velocity Province, has been growing and messing the magnetic field up. Scientists think that this weird rock-like thing is messing with the flow of the outer core, disturbing the magnetic field above it. That disturbance is what weakens the shield over the South Atlantic. It's like a crack in a windshield. It might not shatter immediately, but the weak spot spreads over time. Now, NASA is watching it closely. Satellites passing through this anomaly experience random glitches and shutdowns. Sometimes their circuits short-circuit from high-energy solar particles. Mission operators have to turn off systems before entering the danger zone, and it's only getting worse. The anomaly is drifting westward. This means that new areas could fall under its influence. What's even worse, it seems like it's been splitting in two, which means our planet has been developing two weak spots instead of one. And here's something crazy. Some scientists believe that this entire thing is part of a long-term cycle that's been repeating for over 11 million years. And that cycle would make our magnetic poles flip. North could literally become south, and vice versa. Earth's magnetic poles have flipped before, although the last time that happened was 780,000 years ago, way before humans started roaming around the planet. These reversals happen every few 100,000 years. Now, some wonder if our anomaly is the beginning of the next flip, but scientists aren't sure if we're overdue or just in a temporary phase. Luckily, If a flip were to happen, it wouldn't be instant. It would take thousands of years. But as the field weakens, more radiation would reach Earth's surface. It would mess up not just technology and equipment, but also us, and even animal migration patterns. Many animal species use Earth's magnetic field to navigate. And they even have some potential culprits that could have caused this weird thing. There are two massive, mysterious blobs of hot, dense material deep inside our planet. One is under Africa, and the other formed under the Pacific Ocean. They're called large, low-velocity provinces. Basically, huge underground rock-like formations. Both blobs are gigantic. Each one is hundreds of times taller than Mount Everest and stretches across thousands of miles. They make up 6% of the entire Earth's volume and are one of the biggest geological features inside our planet. They're also super weird and could be structured more like trees than some lumpy mountains. Scientists imagined them as softened rock at first, but based on recent imaging techniques, it looks like they might actually have jagged, branch-like structures extending upward. These are like branches of a tree. They could be feeding hotspot volcanoes at the surface, like the ones in Hawaii. Scientists still don't know exactly what these blobs are. However, they believe they control a lot of what happens on Earth's surface. Stuff like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and, of course, changes in the magnetic field. They may also be linked to supervolcanoes and mass extinctions. The eruptions that they could cause could be like the ones that happened in ancient times and possibly wiped out entire species. If the blobs are connected to supervolcanoes, they might have had absolutely insane disasters in the past and might even cause more troubles in the future. But they also help us control plate tectonics, which affect earthquakes and mountain formation. They might also contain material from Earth's early days, or even from Theia. That was the mysterious planet that crashed into Earth and helped form the Moon about 4.5 billion years ago. Finally, Earth literally breathes because of these blobs, which is insane. The Sun and the Moon's gravitational pull stretches the Earth slightly, making it rise and fall like a breath. But now, scientists found that this tidal movement is slightly off-kilter over the blobs. They literally interfere with how the Earth's mantle moves. These two huge structures actually actively affect how our planet behaves, which is super dangerous. We only recently learned how these blobs actually appeared on our Earth. It's all because of the sunken ocean crust. Over hundreds of millions of years, parts of the ocean floor have sunk deep into the Earth's mantle. These slabs of rock stacked up at the bottom. This way, they slowly formed these massive blobs of recycled crust. Scientists haven't agreed on whether the blobs are heavier or lighter than the rest of the mantle. One study suggested they are denser, which would mean they're made of heavier material. Another study suggested they are less dense, meaning they could be hot, rising plumes of lighter rock. The African blob is suspected to be one of the causes of the South Atlantic anomaly, but scientists are still investigating how exactly they are connected. Since the African blob is basically a giant dense blob sitting on top of the outer core, it could cause troubles. The African blob is hotter and possibly chemically different from the surrounding mantle. It could be disturbing the outer core, affecting the magnetic field, weakening it. Another crazy thing is that they might contain an ocean of water locked inside their minerals. Scientists discovered that huge amounts of water, as much as all of Earth's oceans combined, are trapped in minerals deep in the mantle. One mineral, ringwoodite, can store water inside its crystal structure, but it's only possible under extreme pressure and super hot temperatures, like in the deep mantle. So there could be vast hidden water reservoirs inside the blobs. Not literal bodies of water, of course, but tons of little water molecules weirdly locked away deep beneath the surface. If this water were somehow released, it could potentially trigger massive volcanic activity, or even affect global climate. But the blobs are not the only factor for this weird anomaly. Other factors also contribute, like the tilt of Earth's magnetic field, changes in the core's iron flow, and even plate tectonics. However, the large provinces are making things worse. They keep evolving somehow. Scientists think that it might be because massive columns of hot rock called mantle plumes are rising from deep inside the Earth. These plumes could be pushing the giant pieces of Earth's crust like tectonic plates around, especially in the Pacific Ocean. If this is true, then these giant underground blobs aren't just sitting still. They're moving, changing, and shaping the Earth's surface all the time, almost like they're alive. So what does this mean for the future? If the African blob continues evolving, the South Atlantic anomaly might get larger or shift further, affecting more satellites and spacecraft. Right now, there are still more questions than answers. Every new data point helps predict how it will evolve and whether we need to worry about the worst-case scenarios. For now, NASA isn't panicking, but they're watching very closely. Because whether it's a harmless shift or a sign of something bigger, one thing is clear: something deep inside Earth is changing.
So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America. And there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darien Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darien province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment, known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darien Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no-man's land. Since there are no police stations, immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darien Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darien Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darien Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer-de-lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, these spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darien Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darien Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darien Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darien Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darien pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darien Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
A man went for a walk not far from Buenos Aires in Argentina and found something that looked like a dinosaur egg lying in the mud. When he shared his find with his family, everyone thought it was a joke, but it was actually very real. Except it wasn't a dinosaur egg, but a glyptodont shell. These guys went extinct thousands of years ago. Some of them grew up to be the size of a small car. The Paleo-Indians, who were the ancestors of Native Americans, must have had a fun time living alongside those beasts. People keep finding similar black scaly shells, which are fossils of glyptodonts in the Americas. These creatures thrived in South America for tens of millions of years and also spread up north. They had thick armor, called a carapace, and tough, grooved teeth for eating grass. They weren't always giant, but it looks like a colder climate before the Ice Age, with open woodlands and plenty of grass, helped them evolve. It's pretty hard to hide when you're huge, so they may have developed their fused armor to protect themselves. One of the most famous types had a long tail with spikes that it used to fight other glyptodonts for territory or mates. Although they look similar, the ancient glyptodonts were really different from today's armadillos. Glyptodonts had a hard, heavy armor made of fused plates, and today's armadillos have flexible armor and can roll up into a ball to protect their soft tummies. Plus, glyptodonts ate grass using their grooved teeth, and armadillos prefer insects for lunch. But despite all the differences, recent studies of their DNA showed that glyptodonts actually belonged to the armadillo family. If you think the glyptodont was scary, just wait till you meet the giant short-faced bear. This bad guy grew to almost twice the height of Michael Jordan when it stood on its hind legs. It also weighed over 1,500 pounds, and it was able to run at the speed of over 40 miles per hour. This bear preferred meat to all other foods. Even its skull and teeth were designed for slicing through meat, and it had forward-facing eyes that gave it sharp vision. Its strong jaws and large muscles helped it crush bones to get to the nutritious marrow inside. The giant short-faced bear lived in places like Minnesota and west of the Mississippi River, all the way up to Alaska. It went after or scavenged big animals like bison, musk oxen, deer, and even ground sloths. But it eventually went extinct because its prey didn't survive the Ice Age. Today, the only living relative of the short-faced bears is the spectacled bear from South America. This guy is much smaller, about the size of a black bear, and it eats both plants and meat. Game of Thrones fans, the next one is for you. The orphaned wolf cubs adopted by the Stark family in the epic series were inspired by dire wolves. Their name translates from Latin as terrible wolf. These great uncles of modern dogs were almost 5 feet from head to tail and weighed around 150 to 200 pounds. The oldest record of the dire wolf is from 250,000 years ago. They adapted well to different conditions and lived pretty much all over North America, from as far north as Alaska to down into southern Mexico. They went extinct around 10,000 years ago, soon after the last Ice Age. They most likely just lost their source of food. The closest we have to dire wolves now is the gray wolf, but don't get too upset. Scientists think they could be able to bring the dire wolf back to life. They can combine intact straps of their DNA, recovered from the museum specimens and the genome of modern dogs. One animal you definitely wouldn't want to be on the de-extinction program is the saber-toothed cat. This bad guy lived in prehistoric North America and parts of South America. And nope, it's not related to modern tigers or other cats. It just went extinct. It had the title of the most fearsome Ice Age predator for a long time, until scientists found out at least one species of it was more like a kitty cat. Smilodon, by the way, Diego from Ice Age was one of those. Could only chomp down with 1/3 of the force of modern lions. But it could open its mouth at a 120 degrees angle. And it could wrestle even large prey to the ground with its powerful body, with disproportionately thick front legs and strong neck. The kitty was probably just too afraid to use its long and narrow teeth that could break easily. And one more detail. It had to have lips that could stretch well for the jaws to open wide, so it most likely drooled like a Saint Bernard. Well, at least their teeth grew twice as fast as those of modern lions, and fully formed by the age of 3. The giant beavers, called castoroids, must have grown at the same rate, or so to get as big as a couch. They were about 8 feet long and weighed 200 pounds, which is as heavy as a large refrigerator. They had huge 6-inch long front teeth for gnawing, a narrow tail, and long, shaggy fur. This giant creature lived alongside mammoths and saber-toothed tigers in the woodlands of North America. Like today's beavers, the giant beaver probably spent a lot of time in the water since it was too heavy to move quickly on land. Unfortunately, we don't know for sure if giant beavers built equally giant dams. Even if they did, none of those structures survived over time. Some people think a giant beaver built a 4-foot-tall dam in Ohio, but it's just a guess. Eventually, the giant beaver disappeared, just like other big animals from the last ice age. Early human settlers in North America may have sped up its extinction, as they probably liked its thick fur and meat. By the Ice Age, mastodons, some remote offsprings of the early elephants from Africa, crossed a land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska and made it to North America. Mastodons, like woolly mammoths, had thick, shaggy fur that helped them keep warm in the cold climate of the Ice Age. But unlike the mammoths, who mostly grazed, mastodons were mostly browsers. They like to eat leaves from shrubs and the lower branches of trees. Scientists often find woolly mammoth fossils together, which means they probably lived in groups, like family herds. Mastodon fossils are usually lying alone. This means they may have preferred living on their own and only came together to mate or for a short time with their young. Sadly, both mastodons and woolly mammoths went extinct around 11,000 years ago, not long after the Ice Age. Scientists think this may have happened because of changes in weather patterns, fewer food sources, and possibly early humans. They figured out that one mastodon could feed a tribe for a week and dress them for years. You can mostly find camels in deserts in places like North Africa and the Middle East now. But scientists believe they actually came from North America, especially the lands west of the Mississippi River. Fossils show that camels appeared on Earth about 44 million years ago. In 2015, a team of scientists from the University of Louisiana discovered the bones of a giant ancient camel in Oregon. This camel was between 12 and 14 feet tall, like a modern giraffe. It lived around 7 million years ago and had a long neck to help it reach high plants. About 6 million years ago, some early camels crossed into Asia over the Bering Strait land bridge. Once they arrived in Asia, these camels split into 2 types we know today: the Bactrian camel with 2 humps and the dromedary camel with 1 hump. You won't find wild camels in North America anymore, but some of their relatives, such as llamas, alpacas, and guanacos, still live in South America. Humans are at the top of the food chain, but despite this, some creatures cause us a lot of trouble, and we can't do anything about them. Look at these flies with red eyes and blue-green bodies. These are some farmers' worst nightmare in the United States of America. Meet the New World screwworm flies. These little troublemakers have been munching on livestock from Florida to California for centuries, racking up some serious damage to the agricultural scene. To combat these pesky flies, the U.S. Department of Agriculture dropped a whopping 15 million sterile screwworm larvae from helicopters along the Panama-Colombia border. There's even a factory in Panama cranking out these sterile larvae like it's factory-fresh fruit. This action sounds weird, but it makes a lot of sense. The thing is, female flies only get 1 shot at mating in their entire lives. So if they happen to mate with a sterile dude, that's it. No offspring, ever. This clever trick means healthy screwworms can't reproduce when surrounded by sterile pals, which keeps their numbers in check. But how do we make these male flies sterile in the first place? Simple. A little radiation zap does the trick. You throw a bunch of flies in a lab, give them a quick spin through an X-ray machine, and then drop them from a helicopter into the wild, where their relatives are hanging out. If screwworms start making a comeback, inspectors hop on ATVs and cruise thousands of miles to hunt down any infected animals and stop the spread. There's no magic trick to wipe out these parasites completely, but the game plan is clear. Keep the sterile fly drops coming and stay one step ahead of these pesky little critters. Do you know why it's too dangerous to move animals from one habitat to another? There's a possibility that they won't encounter predators in the new area and will become an invasive species that will provoke an ecological disaster. Here's a simple example. In the 30s in the 20th century, farmers from Australia faced a serious problem. Cane beetles were spoiling sugarcane in the northern part of the country. Insects devoured a huge amount of the harvest, and people couldn't stop it. They didn't want to spoil the cane with poisonous pesticides, so they brought a group of cane toads from South America in the hope that the toads would eat the pests. But when these toads found themselves in the reed fields, they couldn't reach the bugs, as they lived on tall reeds. The toads just couldn't jump at such height and get the pests. So instead of beetles, they began to eat other insects. Amphibians started multiplying at a tremendous rate. The female cane toad can lay about 30,000 eggs at a time. After 3 days, small tadpoles hatch from the eggs. They swim in the water for 20 weeks and then turn into grown-up toads that live from 5 to 10 years. Millions of jumping animals began taking over the entire northern part of the continent, destroying all the biodiversity around. Leaves, grass, insects, carrion. Toads ate all this and didn't leave food for other animals. The problem was that the toads turned out to be very hardy creatures. Heat, cold, rain, droughts, they can breed anywhere and nothing can stop them. But what about other animals? Australia is full of alligators, big birds, and other creatures that would love to feast on croaking amphibians. Yes, it's true. But any animal that tried to eat these toads didn't survive. The problem is that cane toads are venomous. There are special glands behind their eyes that produce strong toxins that cause serious health problems in any animal. Some farmers saw birds falling from the sky after they had swallowed these amphibians. More than 80 years have passed since farmers brought 100 cane toads to Australia. Now, there are about 1.5 billion of them. They have already covered 386,000 square miles, which is about the same area as the states of Texas and Oklahoma combined. And so far, scientists and biologists haven't come up with an effective way to deal with them. People tried to catch them, but it was useless. Even if you catch 98 toads out of 100 next to a small pond, the 2 remaining toads can produce 30,000 eggs per night. Nature may be able to restore balance when some animals with immunity to toad toxins appear in Australia. But at the moment, cane toads are unstoppable. How can we stop the uncontrolled population of mosquitoes that are dangerous to humans? The correct answer is to create 735 million genetically modified mosquitoes and mix these 2 groups. All over the world, many species of mosquitoes carry infections that cause serious health problems to humans. Almost no one likes mosquitoes. These buzzing insects prevent us from sleeping, and their bites are incredibly itchy. Many people would probably be happy if these creatures disappeared from the face of the earth. And scientists might have found a way to make this wish come true. Only female mosquitoes bite us because they need food to produce eggs. So, scientists released genetically modified male mosquitoes with a special protein in their bodies. After 2 mosquitoes come into contact, this protein is transmitted from the male to the female and then prevents it from producing offspring. All this happens before the age when females begin to bite. So, females can't create offspring, which means they don't need to bite people and animals anymore. And the more of such proteins scientists spread, the smaller the mosquito population will be. It sounds good, but about 240,000 people have signed a petition to cancel this experiment. Many scientists believe that the disappearance of one insect species can lead to a biological catastrophe. Nature is a complex, balanced system where the slightest change can lead to serious problems. Mosquitoes are a food source for many reptiles and amphibians. The extinction of mosquitoes can trigger the disappearance of many species. It's like a chain reaction of catastrophes, the end of which is unknown. Nevertheless, modified mosquitoes have already been released in Florida, and it seems that nothing terrible has happened. The good news is that people have fewer health problems after that. Moreover, since 2019, about 1.5 billion mosquitoes have been released worldwide. It has saved millions of lives and hasn't disrupted the delicate balance of nature yet. Recently, scientists have released another group of safe mosquitoes in East Africa. Well, let's hope that scientists have everything under control. Invasive species are not always mosquitoes, flies, or amphibians. These can also be large animals, such as feral pigs or super pigs. These pigs are a mix of domestic swine and wild boar. There are already almost 7 million feral hogs in the south of the USA. Thanks to people's efforts, these animals haven't spread to the north yet, but the danger to the northern states comes from Canada. Pigs were brought there in the 80s to support agriculture, but in the early 2000s, wild boars lost their popularity. They just stayed in the wild, and farmers were sure that those animals wouldn't survive the harsh Canadian winter. Oh, how wrong they were. Wild pigs turned out to be hardy, mobile, and capable of rapid reproduction. These animals dig and tear up the ground, eat almost everything they come across, and thus take food from other animals. By the way, other creatures can become their lunch too. Wild pigs attack mice, geese, ducks, and some species of deer. They trample crops, grass, and flowers and are not afraid of anything. They're like natural bulldozers. Any farm is in danger of extinction if it's in the path of thousands of super pigs. And people can't do anything with them. The northern states understand that an invasion is imminent, so they're preparing for a long battle. Super pigs love swampy areas with tall grass. Canadian and American farmers will try to drive them into more open areas and fence those places off. The plan is not perfect, but it can slow the pigs down and save some time. If you're planning a trip across the Atlantic, you should prepare for more than just the jet lag. Depending on where you land, life in Europe can seem a bit unusual. So it's best to do a bit of research before you travel. Speaking of quirky little differences, one of the first things you may notice is the lack of AC. Hope you like fresh air because central air conditioning isn't everywhere like you might be used to. In Europe, you might find that someone's flat, office, or even a full restaurant doesn't have an AC unit. That's because some Europeans rely solely on their windows to get a breeze. However, bigger places like grocery stores and malls usually keep things well ventilated. Water in European restaurants is not always free either, even though this is common practice in the US. Sure, you'll get a fancy glass bottle at most places, but you'll also see it on your bill. More so, if you ask for water, be sure to specify if you'd like it still, because you might get sparkling water instead. Forget about getting a glass full of ice water too. You might get cold water from the fridge, but Europeans don't do the whole tons of ice thing like they do in the US. If you enjoy sightseeing on a budget, you know how helpful those public toilets can be. After walking for hours, it's great to stumble upon a bathroom where you can freshen up a bit. Well, you better have the equivalent of 50 cents or so in your pocket, because in many European countries, you've got to pay to use these public restrooms. Even fast food restaurants might charge you for the privilege. The best workaround is to head to a mall. Their restrooms are usually free. Also, in the US, bathroom stalls often have a gap at the bottom.
Some say this design was chosen for cleaning purposes and accessibility. In Europe, however, stalls tend to reach the floor for more privacy. Name days are also kind of a big deal in Europe, despite not being so popular in the US. Each day of the year is like a mini birthday celebration for someone with a specific name. Europeans who follow this tradition see it as a second birthday, and even some take it more seriously than their actual birthday. Even the way we perceive things can be totally different depending on where you're from. Take a 100-year-old building in Europe that's practically brand new, but in the US, it's considered old. Depending on who you ask, some Americans might even consider an object that is 200 years old to be ancient. Europeans reserve this word for something that comes from a time before the Middle Ages. However, when it comes to distances, it's quite the opposite. Europeans might find driving 100 kilometers, or about 60 miles, to be a lot, while for Americans, that's a short trip. It does make sense if you think about it, though, because Europe is way more crowded. In fact, the entire European Union is only about half the size of the US. Either way, Europeans are always on the move, whether it's inside their continent or jetting off somewhere else on the planet. It's probably because most European countries are so small by comparison that people grow up thinking it's normal and easy to cross borders all the time. Even the appliances tend to be different when comparing the two regions. Take washing machines, for instance. In Europe, most of them only hook up to cold water, and they load from the front. In the US, it's common to have machines that use both hot and cold water and load from the top. On that note, make sure to research the type of electrical plug used in your European country of choice before traveling. You might find you'll need special adapters to be able to use your phone charger or curling iron while on holiday. Thankfully, most hotels are prepared for these issues and can offer adapters on demand, free of charge. Fridges might seem a bit different too. That's because tiny ones are the norm in Europe, except for large families who invest in bigger fridges and freezers. It's not all bad, especially if you enjoy sharing groceries with roommates, less food wastage, and more frequent trips to the store for fresh food. Might also want to polish your metric system knowledge before heading to Europe too. Everyone there is using meters, grams, liters, and Celsius. Sure, people in the US might learn the metric system in school, but they stick to the other system for their everyday lives, with yards, miles, pounds, and Fahrenheit. Make sure you also double-check dates and times before making any reservations. Europeans write their dates like day, month, year, while Americans flip it to month, day, year. Also, in the US, the week usually begins on Sunday and wraps up on Saturday. But in Europe, it starts on Monday and ends on Sunday. Be on the lookout for the different time format too. In some countries, if someone says it's 14, that translates to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Even advertising might seem a bit different when you first land in Europe. In the US, you might see people wandering around in inflatable costumes on the street to promote local business, but that's a rare sight in Europe. Also, those massive billboard signs you often see along American highways aren't available in most European countries. They're usually against the law because it's believed that drivers should be focused more on the road ahead. And such advertising techniques can be too distracting. Moving on to street names and shopping hours. In North America, especially the USA, it's common to name streets with numbers, like 5th Avenue or 16th Street. But if you head over to Europe, you'll find that streets usually have actual names. In some really rural spots in Europe, you might even stumble upon roads with no names at all. In Europe, there's also a cool tradition of naming roads that connect cities after the city they lead to. Shopping hours in Europe can be a bit confusing too, at times even frustrating. You've probably heard of the siesta in Spain, with some Mediterranean countries having similar customs. It's when shops and businesses take a little afternoon break. Smaller venues in European cities might close up for lunch breaks or have shorter hours on weekends. Some might even stay shut altogether on specific days. It's best to check out the local schedule if you're planning some retail therapy while traveling in Europe. Those shopping hours can really affect your plans and how easily you can get your hands on the stuff you need. While Americans tend to smile more, even to strangers, it can seem a bit unusual to people from other countries. There's a reason behind it though. You see, over the years, the US became this melting pot with people coming in from all over the globe. Being friendly and agreeable became crucial to bridge the gaps created by different cultures and languages. Sometimes it's more helpful to be nice than to be brutally honest. TV watching preferences can also seem different in Europe. Take Norway, for example, where you'll find this cool concept called slow TV. You know how we sometimes zone out in front of a show for hours? Well, Norwegians have turned that into a national sport, if you'd like. Think of it as the visual equivalent of background music. None of us get glued to the screen watching hours of wood burning or knitting marathons. But you might want to check it out when you need some background entertainment that doesn't demand your full attention. Speaking of taking things slow, you might have also heard about a concept called hygge. It's this whole way of life up in the Nordic European countries. Some think these life principles could be the secret to happiness. It's about creating a life that's free from annoying or overwhelming stuff. It's also about prioritizing your relationships and striving to always have a positive attitude.
Imagine sitting at home, drinking coffee, and watching a new episode of your favorite series. And suddenly, boom, crash! What's happened? Nothing terrible, just a meteorite that has just crashed into your kitchen after breaking the roof. You might think this story is entirely made up. But that's what actually happened in New Jersey during the Eta Aquarid meteor shower, which is active from April 19th to May 28th and peaking on May 5th through 6th. The space rock itself was the size of a pork roll sandwich. It was also pitch black and weighed almost 4 pounds. It slammed through the roof and hit the wooden floor, ruining it. When the inhabitants of the house found the rock and touched it, it was still warm. Luckily, the thing wasn't radioactive and there was no one at home at the time this intruder arrived. But the most shocking thing about this meteorite? Astronomers believe it might have come from a cosmic snowball traveling far, far away from Earth. To explain this, I'll have to tell you a bit more about the Eta Aquarid. This meteor shower is famous for its fast meteors, leaving long, glowing trails. It's produced by Comet Halley, completing its orbit around the Sun every 76 years. The comet hasn't visited Earth since 1986 and won't come back until 2061. Right now, it's somewhere near the constellation of Hydra, which is more than 100 light-years away from our planet. Every year, Earth has to pass through trails of debris left by the comet. They collide with our atmosphere, disintegrate, and create beautiful, colorful streaks in the night sky. And it happens every time Halley returns to the inner solar system. Its nucleus sheds a layer of ice and rock into space, and some of it reaches our planet. The Central New Jersey authorities believe the meteorite that sneaked into the house originated from that meteor shower. But I feel that you might be pondering another question that confuses many people. What's the difference between all those space bodies? I mean, there are so many of them flying out there. Meteors, meteorites, asteroids, comets. Ugh. Okay, let's figure it out together. An asteroid is a rocky body orbiting the sun. It's usually not very big and quite inactive. Comets are different. They're covered with ice that normally evaporates in sunlight, forming a coma, which is what a comet's atmosphere is called. This coma consists of dust and gas. A comet also has a tail that is made of dust and/or gas too. A meteoroid is a small part of a comet or asteroid that orbits the sun. If this meteoroid manages to sneak into Earth's atmosphere and vaporize there, it's a meteor. It's often called a shooting star. And finally, if a meteoroid manages to survive the passage through our planet's atmosphere and lands on Earth's surface, it becomes a meteorite. If you think such space guests are a rare occurrence, that's not exactly true. Every day, our planet is hit with more than 100 tons of sand-sized particles. About once a year, a large, car-sized asteroid enters Earth's atmosphere, turns into an impressive fireball and burns, luckily, before reaching the surface of the planet. And every 2,000 years or so, a meteoroid the size of a soccer field hits Earth, causing a lot of damage. And now, imagine this. A huge, really ginormous asteroid is approaching our planet. There's no one on Earth to predict its appearance. Neither is there anyone to stop it. That's why soon, the asteroid crashes into the surface of Earth. The force of the collision is so powerful that the space visitor doesn't stop until it gets through the crust to a depth of several miles. The impact leaves a crater of more than 100 miles across. Thousands of cubic miles of solid rock instantly turn into vapor. The crash sets off a series of natural disasters that erase 75% of life on Earth. The creatures that were close enough to see the crash don't survive for longer than a few seconds. Even closer to the impact crater, the ground is covered with thousands of feet of hot ash, grit, and rubble. Several seconds later, everything for many miles around bursts into flames. What doesn't burn down within the next several minutes after the collision faces a different, even more terrifying fate. The asteroid causes a monstrous, largest ever tsunami. A recent study claims that it was thousands of times more powerful than any wave people have ever seen. The tsunami was so devastating, it eroded seafloor sediments half a world away. The team of scientists even remodeled the events of the first 10 minutes after the impact, and the model showed that the asteroid had produced waves up to 30,000 times greater than one of the largest tsunamis people have ever recorded, the one in the Indian Ocean in 2004. You've probably already guessed that I'm talking about a real-life event, namely the asteroid collision that wiped dinosaurs off the face of the Earth. The Chicxulub asteroid, as we now know it, is believed to come from the outer reaches of the solar system. This space body was at least 6 miles across. It crashed into the shallow seawaters near the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact was so powerful that it left its signature on the face of the planet. In 2021, researchers found out that the collision had carved mega ripples into Earth's crust in the region of modern-day central Louisiana. But such devastating events, when an object that large threatens Earth's inhabitants, happen very rarely, once every few million years. Space rocks smaller than 80 feet usually burn up in the atmosphere of our planet, causing little to no damage. If a rocky meteoroid larger than 80 feet but smaller than half a mile across was to hit Earth, it would cause local damage to the impact area. As for a space rock with a diameter larger than half a mile, it'd likely have worldwide effects. And these space bodies aren't even the largest. For comparison, asteroids populating the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter can be as huge as 580 miles across. But you can breathe out. They're too far away, and don't pose any threat to our planet. All the time, our scientists keep learning more and more about hazardous asteroids and comets. They have even established a Planetary Defense Coordination Office, aka PDCO. It ensures that potentially hazardous objects get detected as early as possible. An object is considered potentially hazardous if its orbit is predicted to bring it within 5 million miles of Earth. It should also be large enough to reach the surface of our planet, over 100 feet across. Interestingly, a meteorite impact isn't the worst thing you need to worry about. Some scientists warn that the most dangerous thing is the shock wave produced by a meteor breaking apart in the atmosphere. For example, one meteor, which originally was an asteroid the size of a 6-story building, entered our planet's atmosphere in February 2013 and broke apart 15 miles above the ground. This generated a shockwave that was equivalent to a ginormous explosion. An even larger space visitor was called the Tunguska meteorite. It was also 10 times more energetic. It broke into pieces over the Tunguska River in June 1908, flattening 500,000 acres of forest. If the meteorite hadn't been so huge, this event would have gone undetected because of the remote location where it all happened. So it's a good thing that 90 to 95% of meteors don't survive the fall through our planet's atmosphere. Only those that are made of stronger materials make it so far. Most meteorites, though, are thought to come from comets, which are way more fragile than asteroids. We should also consider the speed of a meteor. If one is approaching Earth at a slower speed, it's more likely to survive the collision with the atmosphere of our planet. It means that the meteor won't burn completely, and some of its remains will reach the ground.
Some mistakes have the power to change the course of history. One such story has to do with an old, boring key that could have saved the Titanic from its infamous demise. The key belonged to the crow's nest locker that housed binoculars, which could have helped the lookouts spot the iceberg sooner. There's more. The key wasn't even on board the ship when it set sail. The second officer took it with him when he was taken off the ship at the last minute. As the story goes, The officer forgot to hand the key over to his replacement in his hurry to disembark. So, when the lookouts were in desperate need of binoculars, they were out of luck. One of the lookouts, named Fred Fleet, even testified that if they had had binoculars, they would have spotted the iceberg in time to avoid it. And when asked how much sooner, Fleet replied, "Enough to get out of the way." In 2015, some auctioneers got their hands on Blair's key and presented it as one of the most important artifacts from the Titanic. They truly believed it could have saved the ship. Blair kept the key as a souvenir and passed it down to his daughter, Nancy. At one point, it was up for auction with a price tag of over $80,000. Blair himself was quite the hero, it seems. A year after the Titanic disaster, he was awarded a gallantry medal for saving a crewman who had fallen overboard while he had been on board the liner Majestic. He may have forgotten a key, but he sure didn't forget to be a hero when it counted. This next story is both funny and tragic. It's about NASA's lost $125 million Mars Climate Orbiter. The spacecraft engineers failed to convert from English to metric measurements before the craft was launched, and as a result, they lost it. The navigation team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the metric system of millimeters and meters, while Lockheed Martin Astronautics in Denver used the English system of inches, feet, and pounds. JPL engineers mistook acceleration readings measured in English units of pound-seconds for a metric measure of force called Newton-seconds. What's worse is that none of JPL's quality control procedures caught the error in the 9 months it took the spacecraft to make its 461 million-mile flight to Mars. That's a long time to be lost in translation, don't you think? The miscalculations were enough to throw the spacecraft so far off track that it flew too deeply into the Martian atmosphere and was destroyed when it entered its initial orbit around Mars. It's embarrassing to lose a spacecraft to such a simple math error. And it's hard to think of another example of such a large loss due to English versus metric confusion. Ever heard about the mathematical mistake that led to the discovery of the New World? Spoiler alert, it involves a guy named Christopher Columbus and a really big globe. Back in 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with a mission to find a new trade route to Asia. He was convinced that he was less than 3,000 miles away from Japan, and just a bit more sailing would get him to the Indies with all their tasty spices. The only problem was that Columbus was a bit off in his calculations, like way off. He made a mistake in estimating the size of the globe, which led him to believe that Earth was far smaller than it actually is. Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Columbus afraid that he would fall off the edge of the world? Contrary to popular myth, Columbus and his crew knew the Earth was a globe, just like the ancient Greeks did 2 millennia earlier. They weren't worried about falling off the edge, but rather about the size of the ocean they planned on crossing. And to make matters worse, Columbus had no idea that an unknown landmass existed between Spain and Asia. After weeks at sea, Columbus finally reached the Caribbean. He believed that he had landed on the outskirts of Asia, and so named the islands the West Indies. He went on to explore the Caribbean and the northern coast of South America. But here's where things get really interesting. Even though Columbus insisted until his last day that he had reached Asia, another Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci mapped the eastern shore of South America down to Brazil and proved conclusively that Columbus had actually discovered a whole new world. A German mapmaker saw Amerigo's maps and labeled the new landmass America after him. And since his maps were super popular at the time, the name stuck. One man named Alexander Fleming stumbled upon one of the most significant medical discoveries of all time by accident. At one point in his career, Fleming observed the demise of many people from uncontrollable infections. Antiseptics were used to fight this, but they often did more harm than good. In 1922, while he had a cold himself, Fleming transferred some of his, nasal discharge to a petri dish and left it on his cluttered desk. When he finally examined it weeks later, he found that an enzyme had some antimicrobial properties. It wasn't until 1928, when Fleming left an uncovered petri dish next to an open window, that he stumbled upon the discovery that would change the world. The dish became contaminated with fungus spores. And when he examined them under the microscope, Fleming discovered that the bacteria near the fungus were dying. He managed to isolate the fungus and found that it was effective against numerous things that caused diseases. And thus, penicillin was discovered. As Fleming himself put it, "I did not discover penicillin. Nature did that. I only discovered it by accident." Talk about a lucky break. In the early 1520s, the east coast of the United States of America was a big mystery waiting to be solved. The Spanish found Florida, and the English and Portuguese found Newfoundland, but the area in between was like a blank spot on the map. France decided to take action and sent an expedition to explore the area. They chose a guy called Giovanni da Verrazzano to lead the trip. For this expedition, he got 4 ships. Unfortunately, 2 of them were shipwrecked, and a third one went home after doing some other business on the Spanish coast. Only the flagship, La Dauphine, crossed the Atlantic with Verrazzano and his 50-man crew. Verrazzano set sail from Madeira and landed at Cape Fear. From there, he sailed south, but got a little scared of running into the Spanish, so he returned somewhere north of Charleston. He anchored not far from his original landing spot, but unlike other explorers, he preferred to anchor well out at sea. He did send a boat to the shore, and he met the natives. They were described as wearing just some animal skins covering their bodies and garlands of bird feathers. As Verrazzano sailed along the coast, he reached the outer banks of North Carolina. He thought that the waters he discovered were those of the Pacific. In reality, what he'd stumbled upon was the Pamlico Sound. He thought that North America was just a long, extremely narrow strip of land. This mistake led mapmakers to show North America as almost completely divided in two. Moving on, Verrazzano reached a beautiful place that he called Arcadia, probably Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Sailing further north, he missed the entrances to Chesapeake and Delaware Bays because he kept quite far from the coast until New Jersey. Then, the moment we've all been waiting for, Verrazzano discovered New York Harbor, and he anchored in the Narrows. Later, it was named after him, and now it is spanned by the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. Once Verrazzano's sea appeared on the map, it became widely accepted and impacted loads of future explorers. For example, Henry Hudson went looking for a passage to the Pacific in the middle latitudes of the continent. But, as it turns out, the Englishman never did find the Pacific Ocean anywhere near Virginia. And the cartographic myth eventually faded away. It's funny to think about how a mistaken belief could have such an impact on history.
If you ever want to call someone, hoping they won't really answer, try Super Bowl night. Over 100 million people are enjoying America's favorite sports finals, which is the most watched television program of the year. American football is called this way, although you play it with your hands because it developed from 2 sports, rugby and soccer, known as football in Europe. Also, before some major changes in the rules, they both used hands and feet to play. The 1958 NFL Championship game was the first, and so far the only, NFL title game to ever end in overtime. That night, the Baltimore Colts were playing against the New York Giants. The stadium was full with 68,000 fans, and hundreds of thousands were watching it on NBC. At some point, The crowd got so wild that the NBC cable responsible for the broadcast somehow got disconnected. The game was about to be over at any moment, so they had to do something immediately. Earlier that year, the New York Times asked the producer if they had any plan B for such a scenario. He laughingly answered they'd probably have to send someone onto the field to delay the game. And that's exactly what they did. They sent their business manager to run up and down the field after the timeout. Officers were chasing him for a while, and everyone thought that was just a rowdy fan. That's how NBC saved the broadcast, missing only the first play out of the timeout. It's hard to imagine a football game without huddles. I mean those times when they all gather in a tight circle to discuss the strategy, motivate each other, or celebrate. But those huddles only became a thing in the 1890s thanks to Paul Hubbard, a hearing-impaired quarterback for Gallaudet. He didn't want the other teams to read his hand signals, so he gathered his teammates in a tight circle to protect their secrets. The 1982 Stanford Cardinal and California Golden Bears went down in history because of the play that unfolded in the final seconds. Stanford had a 20-19 lead, and there were just 4 seconds left. You'd think that's nothing, but the time was enough for Golden Bears to turn the tables. They did 5 backyard passes, and bam! Final touchdown. They won 25-20. Unlike professional football balls, the balls used at college games have white stripes painted at one of the ends to make it easier to spot the ball during nighttime games. Wilson, a famous sports equipment company, has been the exclusive provider of footballs for NFL games since 1941. They now produce 4,000 footballs every day. The first American football game in history was played between Rutgers and Princeton colleges. It was popular among students, but soon became quite a rough sport. At some point, it was even banned to play football in public spaces. Walter Camp, a famous rugby player, became Yale's football team captain and saved the day. He changed the rules of the game and made it a lot as we know it today. The 20-yard line to the end zone is known as the red zone. Red was chosen for the name, as it's a warning color for the defense. Once the offense reaches this zone, they are in the best scoring position. Gridiron football is another name for the game. No fun stories here. The only reason is that the playing field does look like a gridiron used in cooking. It seems almost impossible that brothers would be coaching NFL teams that play at the Super Bowl, but it happened in 2013. Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh coached the San Francisco 49ers and Baltimore Ravens and stood against each other at the big game. Their parents were watching in the Superdome. John, the elder brother, won. They briefly exchanged congratulations after the game, but didn't speak for weeks after it. Both admitted that the game was emotionally super hard for them. There used to be the National Football League and the American Football League, each with its own champion, until they merged in 1970. They had to decide about the new structure and couldn't come to an agreement. And guess how they finally solved it? Well, they just dropped 5 options into a vase and took one out at random. Kansas City Chief Lamar Hunt coined the name Super Bowl as he was inspired by a toy for just 98 cents. His wife found it at a toy store in Dallas, Texas, and told him the little ball could bounce over a small house. Not everyone liked this idea, and there were even contests for a different name, but nothing has beaten the toy-inspired one. The first Super Bowl took place on January 15, 1967. The tickets were just $12 compared to the $100,000 that you'd have to pay for the VIP suite today. Yet, there were still many empty seats at Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, where it took place. They chose the location only 6 weeks before kickoff. Now it's known 3 years before the actual game. Ever since the 5th Super Bowl, they have used Roman numbers for identifying the games. It helps avoid some confusion. For example, Super Bowl 2023 would take place at the beginning of that year, but the majority of the season would have been played in 2022. The only exception was Super Bowl 50. The NFL believed naming it Super Bowl L might have lowered ticket sales. The NFL never pays any of those superstar singers that perform at halftime shows. Appearing there at the prime time brings the artists much more money in the long run, as their record sales always spike after the game. They do get money to cover the expenses they have to prepare for the show, though. It can be more than $10 million, so that's not a bad deal after all. Each Super Bowl team gets 108 balls, 54 of them serve as practice balls, and another 54 are used during the actual game. The usual halftime of the NFL game is 12 to 15 minutes, but the super halftime is 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the performance that's going on. The coin they flipped at the 44 game to decide which team would start the kickoff had spent 11 days on a NASA spaceship orbiting the Earth. To make sure the game is always fair, there must be 7 officials with different functions present on the field. You can recognize them by their black and white striped shirts. The referee is the highest rank among them and has the most responsibilities. Then comes the umpire, the back judge, the head linesman, the side judge, the line judge, and the field judge. Miami has hosted the Super Bowl the most, with 11 games. The runner-up is New Orleans with 10. It normally takes place in a warmer climate or at an indoor stadium. The only exception was the game that took place at Tulane Stadium in New Orleans, when the temperature at game time was 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The Arizona Cardinals are older than the state they represent. The team was founded in 1898, and Arizona officially became a state only 14 years later. The team also had the longest period in NFL history when they didn't win a single game postseason. 51 years. NFL gives the winning team members the Super Bowl rings. Those never repeat each other, as the winners choose how to customize it to make it special. Designing them takes up to 4 months. The ring will normally have the team name and logo, the world champion's title, and the Super Bowl logo and number. The team can award the rings to whomever they decide, not just players, but coaches, trainers, executives, personnel, general staff, and also former players and coaches. That's why the total price of the set is around $5 million. The Green Bay Packers Super Bowl 45 ring had over 100 diamonds, 13 of them representing every title the team has won since 1929.
Everyone stares at the flight attendant as she hastily walks past the passengers. She ignores any request that comes to her and rushes to the cockpit. Everyone looks at each other confused. Is there a problem with the plane? Behind all these worried people, one man is sitting patiently, waiting for his plan to unfold. No one knew the danger they were about to be in. It's Thanksgiving. Everyone is boarding a plane from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington for the holidays. Everything seemed like a typical day at the airport, except for when D.B. Cooper walked in. No one noticed him, and no one suspected anything out of him. He is a man of mystery. And when I say mystery, I mean D.B. Cooper isn't his actual name. Until this day, no one knows his real identity. All we know is that he bought a ticket under the name of Dan Cooper. But the media came into the picture and started telling this story portraying him as D.B. Cooper. And ever since then, he was known by this name. He was described by witnesses as a middle-aged man in his mid-40s. He was wearing a dark business suit with a black raincoat. He wore a white shirt and a thin black tie. The flight was short, 37 minutes to be exact. So nobody figured that something terrible was going to happen. He boarded a Boeing 727, carrying nothing but a black briefcase and a brown paper bag. Back then, there wasn't any background checking or luggage scanning for safety measures. You just walk in, grab your seat, and be done. He strategically took a seat in the last row and ordered some beverages just as the plane was ready for takeoff. In a few minutes, the pilot announces that they're ready to fly. The passengers on board are expecting to munch on some delicious turkey and be with their families in less than an hour. Cooper had other plans and waited until the plane was in mid-flight. He noticed that everyone was minding their own business. He had a note with him and waited for the flight attendant to approach him so that he could give it to her. Her seat was directly behind him, so once she was nearby, he handed her the note. At first, the flight attendant didn't make much of the note, thinking that the middle-aged man was just handing her his phone number. But then, he leaned in towards her and told her to read it. Her face turned white. She couldn't tell whether this was a prank or he was serious. But she looked at him, and he wouldn't blink. The note was hinting that he was carrying something devastating in his luggage. To keep everyone safe, he demanded $200,000 by 5 p.m. It might not seem like a lot of money to demand given you're in a position of power, but back then it was a lot. That value now would be around $1.4 million. He also requested 2 front parachutes and 2 main parachutes to be worn on his back. The flight attendant passed the message to the pilot, who made the request through the radio. At first, no one noticed anything, but then news caught on about Cooper's plans. They noticed how the flight attendant was jittery and uncomfortable. Once they landed in Seattle, Cooper wasn't done. He seemed confident in his plan according to the people on board. They brought him the money and refueled the plane so that he can continue with his plan. They also brought the parachutes as he demanded. He was meticulous in the order in which his demands were met. He wouldn't let anyone off the plane unless the money was brought in. He asked for 4 civilian parachutes that the authorities brought from a skydiving school. Once he received his parachutes, he allowed the passengers to leave. The only people left on the plane were 3 flight members and 3 cabin crew. Cooper was losing his patience since refueling the plane was delayed. On top of that, they didn't deliver the money to him in a knapsack as he asked. According to witnesses, he was a calm person and didn't lash out at anyone. But eventually, the plane took off. No one knew what his plan was. He showed the flight plan to the pilots and told them to fly toward Mexico City as slowly as possible and to remain at around 10,000 feet above the ground. The flight route was well designed, like someone who had aviation experience in the past. He told them to leave the landing gear deployed during takeoff and mid-flight, and for the cabin to remain unpressurized. His plan was in motion, but there was another problem. Cooper had been informed that the plane could only travel another 1,000 miles with the amount of fuel given. That means he couldn't make it to Mexico. After much pondering, Cooper decided that they would have to stop for another refueling. They decided to land at Reno Tahoe International Airport in Nevada. Cooper knew that this would stop him from running away with the money, so he told everyone to wait near the cockpit. He was now alone where 35 other passengers would be sitting. It's only been 4 or 5 minutes since the plane took off from Seattle. The pilots received a warning red light flashing, showing that the internal pressure has changed. A witness recalls peeking at him, tying the money to his waist as he strapped on the parachute. Some of the cabin members asked him if he needed any help through the intercom. He simply replied no, and that was the last thing Cooper ever said to them. Once the stairs were deployed out of the tail of the plane, the back end suddenly shifted upward, but the pilot was experienced enough to keep it flying level. They would constantly announce to Cooper that they were about to land and that they needed him to close the aft stairs. But he wasn't responding. No one from the crew went back to see where he was. They landed safely with the stairs still deployed. The authorities rushed to the scene to sweep out the area in case he was still there. But after 30 minutes, there was no sign of them. They can confirm that Cooper had jumped out of the plane with the money strapped to him via a parachute in the pitch-black night. And since that day, Cooper was never seen again. It's not clear whether he made it to Mexico or not, and no evidence shows whether he survived or not. Some of the money with the same serial numbers given to him was found in Washington, but that's the only trace of him. Either he made it back to Washington, or the money was found somewhere and spent by the finder of the loot. If he's around today, then he'd be in his mid-90s, which equally means he might not be around today. It's not like it was a complete dead end. Throughout the years, many people became obsessed with D.B. Cooper, that they came to the authorities to claim they were the ones who did it. But they were just seeking attention. Who wouldn't want to be the hero in this? The authorities even believed he could have been Canadian, since Cooper was named after a comic book hero who used to jump out of planes to escape danger. So many theories popped out of thin air, but nothing was conclusive. There was a famous sketch of Cooper, but it's hard to truly identify the man. Cooper became a celebrity and a hero to some. Some people even launched a Cooper Con, where fans of the mystery man would meet up together and share their theories and so-called evidence of his presence. The truth is, we still don't know. In 2016, the authorities decided not to pursue D.B. Cooper anymore. They claimed it was too time-consuming and one of the most exhaustive investigations in their entire history. All we know is that this incident changed the entire way we approach air travel forever.
New York City's Herald Square Hotel. Maid with a cart of clean linen is walking along the corridor on the 5th floor and making the bed in each room. She cleaned rooms 550, 551, and 553. She skipped the room 552 because she knew that the tenants wouldn't open the door. Strange woman had been living there for more than 20 years. Hotel records said 3 women had checked into 552. Ida Wood with her sister and her daughter. No one had ever seen them, but they always paid their bills on time. They ordered milk, coffee, bacon, eggs, and other food almost every day. The messenger brought it up to them and received a dime as a tip every time. The residents of room 552 did not allow anyone to clean it. Jesus. Only twice in all her time working here, the maid managed to persuade Ida to replace dirty sheets with clean ones. Even then, the mysterious woman passed the laundry through a slightly open door and didn't show her face. And then, one day, everything changed. In the spring of 1931, at 4 p.m., the door opened. 93-year-old Ida Wood looked out of the room and asked the maid to call the doctor. Ida's sister, unfortunately, had fallen very ill. People quickly gathered around room 552. Doctors, hotel managers, lawyers, and cleaners. The image, what they saw inside, stuck in the heads of many New Yorkers for a very long time. News about Ida Wood spread almost all over the US. Months and even years later, people were still discussing this mysterious woman. But to understand what happened here, let's find out who Ida Woods was. Ida came to New York in 1857 at the age of 19, and her last name was Mayfield. Her father was some rich sugar plantation owner in the South. At some point, she decided to change her life and move north. Here in New York, she quickly became a popular girl. Beautiful, young, and very smart, Ida easily figured out who to be friends with and who to avoid. She knew all the gossip and social life news of New York. She was always a welcome guest at any party. Many men were delighted with her beauty and intelligence, but no one could get into a relationship with her, since no one met her requirements. Once, Ida even wrote a letter to one of the most influential men in the city, Benjamin Wood. He was a well-known entrepreneur, owned a shipping company and a popular newspaper. Benjamin's brother was the ex-mayor of New York. Ida's letter was romantic and quite witty. Ida asked Ben for a meeting, and he agreed. When he saw her in real life for the first time, he immediately fell in love with her. From that moment, Ida's life changed completely. She now lived in luxury and any door was open to her. Thanks to her position, she even danced with the Prince of Wales and managed to meet Abraham Lincoln and many other celebrities. So in 1867, she became Ben's wife. Ida didn't behave like a fortune hunter. She was a good wife and loved her husband. They had a daughter called Emma, and life was perfect, except for one thing. Ben was very fond of gambling. On some days, he managed to win a huge prize, and others he lost a lot of money. Unlike him, Ida could save money and knew its value as she was afraid of losing it. So she made a deal with her husband. When he lost, he'd give Ida an amount equal to the loss. When he won, he'd give his wife half of the winnings. Benjamin agreed to the terms. Ida hoped she would help her husband forget gambling, but he went on with it. On one hand, Ida was worried about this, but on the other hand, her wealth was growing rapidly. In 1900, Ben passed away. Journalists found out that Mr. Wood didn't own any real estate and had no valuable property. There wasn't much money left in his account, and everyone understood that his huge fortune was in his wife's hands now. Ida Wood became one of the wealthiest women in New York. She owned not only property and money, but also the newspaper. For the next few months, she was running this business, attending many social events, traveling a lot, and even donating a lot of money to charity. But then, in 1901, something happened. It seemed like money was starting to drive her mad. She felt she was spending too much and could run out of money, or someone could take it away from her. She sold the newspaper for more than $250,000, along with the expensive possessions she acquired over the years: outfits, paintings, sculptures, furniture, and houses. She put all the money in her bank account. Meanwhile, the financial situation was starting to heat up. People were nervous about the coming crisis. Ida felt it as well, and this made her emotional state even worse. In 1907, Ida came back to the bank and withdrew about $1 million from her accounts. She didn't trust banks and decided to keep that money to herself. After that, she, along with her daughter Emma and her sister, Miss Mary Mayfield, rented a room at the Herald Square Hotel. They brought all their personal belongings there, as well as suitcases filled with money. She didn't allow any contact with the outside world, forbade the maids to enter her room, and asked to leave food next to the door. This is how she lived for the next few decades. Then, at the age of over 70, Ida's daughter became very ill. She was taken to a hospital where she unfortunately passed away. Ida stayed to live with her sister, and in spring of 1931, Miss Mary Mayfield became ill too. Ida decided to leave the hotel and finally end her seclusion. Her room was super dirty and messy. There were pieces of food and garbage on the floor. The two old residents looked mentally unstable. They were super thin and wearing dirty old clothes. There were stacks of yellowed newspapers, boxes of half-eaten crackers, balls of thread and rope, sheets of old wrapping paper, and several large suitcases with millions of dollars inside. Among the many things they found there were securities with valuable shares that hadn't been cashed out for decades. And by that moment, their total value had grown to $175,000. The sister passed away and the doctors took her out of the room. Ida helped them, but she was afraid to leave the door open, and she had her reasons. Ida had 54 suitcases full of money. Some of them were stored in a warehouse in the suburbs. They were filled with fabrics and dresses from Europe, expensive necklaces, bracelets, watches, and cut gems. They found a $40,000 necklace in an old cracker box. They found another $250,000 in a shoebox. One of the nurses caring for Ida discovered $500,000 in cash in her dress in a hidden pocket. Everyone understood that Ida couldn't live on her own. She was sick and weak, so they moved her to another room on another floor. Lawyers and next of kin recognized Ida as incapacitated and began to count her fortune. During the investigation, the news about the wealthy old lady spread all over New York. There were people who called themselves relatives of Ida, and each of them claimed a rich inheritance. Ida's health was getting worse. When they brought her water and food, she asked how much it costs. If something was more expensive than a single dollar, Ida refused to accept it. She believed that they kept her captive, so she often looked out of the window and screamed for help. She considered almost everyone around her enemies, except for the nurses, whom she believed to be her confidants. She told them episodes from her life and shared her secrets. On March 12, 1932, Ida finally passed away. Soon, a large-scale court case began to split her property and money. More than 1,000 applicants came to the meeting. Many of them were from Louisiana. They said they were Ida's relatives from her father's side. Meanwhile, an investigation about Ida's identity continued. They found out Ida never even lived in the South. Her father was not a sugar plantation owner, and her real name was Ellen Walsh. She was born and raised in the rough neighborhoods of Dublin. But the most interesting thing was that her daughter Emma wasn't her child. She was her sister. No one knew why they pretended it was otherwise. It's possible that Ida's husband knew this, but he never revealed his wife's secrets. Ida's big secret got out, but some questions about her remain. How did a poor girl from Dublin manage to get into the circle of wealthy bohemians of New York so easily and quickly? Why did her sister pretend to be her daughter, and what exactly caused her insanity? We're still discussing this
On December the 5th, 1952, a nauseating yellow-gray fog engulfed London, claiming 12,000 lives. This wasn't mere mist. It stank of rotting eggs and stretched 30 miles wide. Buses halted, planes were grounded, and ambulances were trapped. For 5 days, the city vanished in the stench and sludge. Streets slick with a black ooze. Those who dared ventured out stumbled blindly, smudging their faces while birds crashed into buildings. With visibility zero, thieves ran rampant, and even indoor shows were canceled. The Great Smoke sent over 100,000 people to hospitals, leaving a grim legacy of demise and decay. The causes of this tragedy started long into the past. Something called pea soup fog became one of the symbols of London in the 19th century. Nature wasn't to blame for this fog. It was caused by people burning coal to heat their homes and run factories. In fact, London's air started getting smoky all the way back in the 13th century, when people began widely using coal. It got worse as the city grew bigger. By the 17th century, people were already complaining about the dirty air. King James I tried to prevent so much coal burning with new laws, but nothing really changed. As more factories popped up during the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century, the problem blew out of proportion. The air was full of tiny particles that water clung to and formed dark, heavy clouds. This mix of smoke and fog became so bad, people called it smog. Yep, this word was invented in London in the early 20th century. The smog got so thick sometimes it could last for a whole week, and it made people ill. Some even passed away because of it. Even though the smog was harmful, people didn't want to stop using coal because it gave them jobs and kept their homes warm. So the problem lingered. By the 20th century, thick fogs were happening less frequently, finally, because factories started moving away from the city. But on that December day in 1952, an anticyclone appeared over London. This meant that the cold air near the ground got trapped under warmer air higher up, like a lid keeping everything underneath. Because of this, all the smoke from factories, cars, and home fireplaces couldn't float up and away like usual. Instead, it clung near the ground, mixed with water in the air, and produced an extremely thick, dirty fog. Plus, daylight in December is shorter, and it was really cold, so people had to use even more coal for heating and lighting than they normally did. All this led to a disaster. It was clear that sulfur particles from the burning coal made the fog yellow and smell like rotten eggs. But scientists couldn't figure out why and how these particles turned into sulfuric acid. Decades later, an international team of researchers recreated that scary fog in a lab. They used samples of air and atmospheric measurements from the fog in two large Chinese cities that have high levels of sulfur dioxide in the air, just like London during the Great Smoke. They learned that the thick, dirty air, called haze, doesn't form in the same way in London and in China. In London's fog, smoke from burning coal released two gases, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide. These gases mixed with water droplets in the fog, which made it harmless at first because the water diluted the harmful chemicals. But as the water evaporated and there was nothing to dilute the two dioxides, the fog became very acidic and hazardous to breathe, so it damaged people's lungs. In present-day China, things are a little different. A third chemical, ammonia, joins the mix. Now ammonia, which comes from farms and cars, helps balance out the acidity of the fog, so it's less harmful than London's deadly fog. But the scientists found that cutting down on nitrogen dioxide and ammonia could still help China reduce its air quality problems. They hope that their discovery will help both understand London's past fogs and give China ideas for making its air cleaner. It could also save the health of millions of people around the world who are now living in cities with bad air quality. After the terrible fog of 1952, everyone realized how serious London's air problem was. 4 years later, the British authorities created a law called the Clean Air Act to stop something like that from happening again. This law banned people from burning smoky fuels like coal in their homes or in factory furnaces in some parts of the city. To help people adjust, the authorities gave them money so that they could switch to cleaner heating options like oil, natural gas, or electricity. It took time for these changes to make a big difference, and sadly, another dangerous smog happened in 1962. But the Clean Air Act was a very important first step for protecting the environment and people's health. Almost a century before the Great Smoke, another smelly event happened to London, the Great Stink. Back then, people didn't have proper bathrooms or sewers, and all the waste from houses and factories went straight into the River Thames. When the weather got super hot in July and August, the water level in the river went down, and piles of waste, sometimes 6 feet, popped up on the muddy banks. The smell was so terrible that even Queen Victoria and Prince Albert had to cancel their relaxing boat ride on the river. The politicians working in the brand new Parliament buildings, which were right by the river, couldn't handle the smell either. The air inside was so terrible that they had to hold handkerchiefs over their noses to breathe. They even tried soaking the curtains in chloride of lime, hoping it would cover up the horrible odor. Many Londoners believe that the bad air, called miasma, caused horrible things like cholera, which had already taken the lives of lots of people. Engineer Joseph Bazalgette solved the problem as he built a new sewer system that would move all the waste away from the city. His sewer system was so well designed that it still works today, even though London has grown to over 8 million people. On the other side of the Atlantic, in the United States, there was also a day when you couldn't see your hand before your face, and it was impossible to breathe outside. But the reasons for this Black Sunday were very different from the Great Smoke of London. In 1931, it almost completely stopped raining in the southern Great Plains. This drought lasted for nearly 10 years. Without rain, the farms dried up and the soil turned to dust. Strong winds blew this dry dirt into the air and created huge dust storms. These storms, called black blizzards, made it hard to breathe and see anything. People tried to protect themselves by putting Vaseline in their noses, wearing masks, and sealing their homes, but the dust still made many of them sick. In 1934, things got even worse. It was the driest year in over 1,000 years. Temperatures went over 100 degrees for weeks, and the land became even drier. On April 14, 1935, after months of terrible weather, the sky finally looked clear, and there was barely any wind, which was rare for this area. People came outside as they were hoping that the worst was finally over. When Oklahoma minister announced that a few good rainstorms would make the land fertile again. But unfortunately, that morning, a cold wind from Canada met warm air in the Dakotas and started a massive dust storm. The storm grew to hundreds of miles wide and thousands of feet tall. A sunny day instantly became completely dark. Drivers had to hide in their cars, and other people went down into basements, found refuge in barns, fire stations, tornado shelters, and under their beds to stay safe. The storm didn't stop for hours and took at least 20 lives. Many people couldn't stop coughing, and one man went blind. The storm was so strong, it carried 300,000 tons of dirt across the country and even reached the East Coast. The LaLaurie Mansion, located in the French Quarter of New Orleans, has a grim reputation. Its former owner, Madame Delphine McCarthy LaLaurie, was a wealthy socialite in the early 19th century. The urban legend says that she treated her workers very badly. One night on April 10, 1834, Madame LaLaurie's house began to burn. Madame and her family managed to escape, but she abandoned her workers. They were locked inside the house. The locals, outraged by her negligence, gathered around the house, broke some of its walls, and eventually stole the remaining possessions. After the fire, the LaLaurie family escaped to Paris. Another private mansion was built on this Louisiana land. But it's said that the ghosts of those workers are still trapped inside the property. They tend to bother living people demanding justice. Today, the house is private, but you can book a tour and hear this story in detail. By the way, the mansion and its notorious owner played a big part in the American Horror Story franchise, although they didn't actually film the series in that particular house. American actress and director Kathy Bates played Madame LaLaurie and showcased the quirky character of this famous woman. So you can check it out if you're not afraid. Our next creepy destination was also shown in a movie franchise, the Amityville Horror. The media says this Dutch colonial-style home is located in the village of Amityville in New York. George and Kathy Lutz bought this property in 1975 for $80,000. The low price was due to the tragedy that happened in the house 1 year before. One night, a young man named Ronnie DeFeo, who lived in the house, took the lives of all his family members. The Lutz family began to notice strange activities in the house, such as phantom odors, unreasonably low temperatures, and loud sounds of unknown origin. According to the Lutz family, one day they called a preacher to clear the grim vibes, but he felt very bad during the ritual and his hands started bleeding. The Lutzes fled the house in a rush. Their spooky story inspired the Amityville Horror, a book written by American author Jay Anson and several successful horror movies. Although the house was reconstructed, it still exists. However, its address has been changed to confuse the trail and prevent crowds of tourists from gathering around it. Do you recognize this seemingly cute house in Harrisville, Rhode Island? It's known as one of the most haunted houses in America. The property earned its notorious reputation after multiple people lost their lives in this house over the years. In 1970, the Perrons family began to live here, and according to the legend, an invisible being lived along with them. At first, the entity was playful, but then it started getting more sinister. The family members experienced physical attacks and unexplainable illnesses. They invited the famous mystery hunters, Ed and Lorraine Warren, to research this case, which later inspired a book and the movie The Conjuring, released in 2013. In 2019, the property was purchased by the Heisens family, who also investigated mysteries. They reported some weird stuff going on in the house too, and eventually developed a successful business on haunted tourism. They sold the property for nearly $1.5 million in 2022. Let's move on to Tennessee. The urban legend tells a creepy story that started in 1804. John Bell and his family moved to this peaceful-looking farm in North Carolina. At first, everything went well, but 13 years later, the family began to experience bone-chilling events. At first, they started seeing weird animal-like shadows around the farm. Soon, these mysterious guests began to whisper and eventually talk out loud. Some mysterious entity began to wake up the family at night with loud noises and attacks. It particularly bothered their young daughter, Betsy Bell. Invisible hands grabbed Betsy by the hair and hit her body. When she grew up and was about to get married, the entity did everything to break the engagement, saying that Betsy wouldn't be happy with her groom. Rumors about these scary events spread throughout the village, and the locals began to visit the farm, hoping to see it for themselves. They called the entity Bell Witch. Many years have passed, but the locals still believe that the phantom of the evil witch lives in these places and hides in a cave near the farm. Ohio is one of the most notoriously haunted states in the USA. One of its legendary spots is the Mansfield Reformatory, a former prison that supposedly hosts the country's most creepy entities. The prison is nearly 130 years old. It was closed in 1990 and soon gained fame, especially after becoming the filming location for The Shawshank Redemption. And since we're passing through Ohio, let's take a look at another spooky place. The Chippewa Lake Amusement Park used to attract many guests with its various rides, roller coasters, and iconic Ferris wheel. But in the 1970s, 100 years after opening, the park was forced to close. It happened due to poor maintenance and low attendance. The park has gone through multiple fires, so today it looks like a bunch of creepy ruins overgrown with shrubs and rust. Mark Twain had been living in this charismatic house in Hartford, Connecticut for about 17 years. In this period, he wrote both The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Today, this property serves as a museum that showcases the author's life. But it's also known for some mysterious phenomena. Multiple visitors reported hearing odd noises and seeing a phantom of a woman in white. The most haunted part of the house is the billiard room. Twain used to chill there a lot during his stay, and today, some visitors claim they can smell tobacco smoke as they pass through. Now, Pennsylvania has lots of terrifying tales to offer. Despite its chic appearance, this fancy mansion has been empty for a while now. Its owner, Peter Widener, finished the construction after losing his beloved wife, Hannah, during a tragic yacht trip. It happened at the end of the 19th century, and eventually, Widener lost multiple relatives in this house. He was wealthy enough to invest in the Titanic construction. Perhaps he was fascinated by the idea of an unsinkable ship. But unfortunately, both Peter's oldest son and grandson lost their lives when the Titanic sank. Eventually, the mansion was abandoned. But it's said that the phantoms of the Widener family are still there. And speaking of the Titanic, Molly Brown was one of the survivors. She got famous for rowing a lifeboat for about 7 hours before reaching a safe place. But Molly's own mansion in Denver gained a spooky reputation. She owned the haunted property together with her husband, who ran a mining business. Over the years, multiple people reported seeing phantoms of cats and human figures running down the staircase of the house. The witnesses of such visions insist that something spooky is definitely going on behind these walls. Today, the mansion operates as a museum, so you can go and see it for yourself. And how about meeting a creepy phantom while doing some casual shopping in Soho? The urban legend dates back to 1799. A young lady, Gulielma Elmore Sands, tried to escape with her lover, Levi Weeks. They were tenants in the same boarding house. Around 2 weeks later, her body was found at the bottom of a well in the building that today hosts a large retail store, COS. After the horrifying discovery, the police arrested Levi. Although he was acquitted, Sands' phantom is said to haunt the building as a warning to other ladies. The creepiest thing is that the well is still there, and shoppers can see it in the basement at the back of the men's department. Now brace yourself and welcome to the famous haunted toy store in Sunnyvale, California. The legend says that the land under the property used to be a plantation owned by Martin Murphy. He hired a preacher, Johnny Johnson, who fell in love with Murphy's daughter, Elizabeth. But she got engaged to a lawyer. Johnny's heart was broken, and he lost his life in an accident while chopping wood. Today, Johnny's phantom reportedly wanders around the Toys R Us store, still chasing his beloved Elizabeth. Customers and employees report seeing objects moving on their own, hearing mysterious footsteps, and even Johnny's whispers over the intercom system. Ooh.
360 years ago, a massive British ship, the London, blew up in the Thames estuary. The tragedy took over 300 lives, including the sailors and their loved ones. No one knows exactly what led to all this, but scientists are finally getting close to the truth. Divers accidentally found an exceptionally well-preserved bronze cannon from the ship. This cannon, that was buried in silt and clay for centuries, could have all the answers. The London was a service ship built for the Navy of the Commonwealth of England. It set off on its first journey in June 1656. The ship played a huge role in British history as it was part of a convoy that went to the Netherlands in 1660 to collect Charles II and restore him to the throne. 5 years later, in March 1665, it was traveling from Chatham to Hope. From there, the Admiral Sir John Lawson was supposed to take it to the sea. But just before reaching the buoy of the Knower, the gunpowder suddenly blew up on the ship. About 25 people who were in the roundhouse and coach survived, but over 300 drowned. The ship broke into 2 pieces. Henry Bennett, the Earl of Arlington, passed along rumors that it all happened because of cheap, low-quality gunpowder that was on the ship. When experts of that time inspected the shipwreck, they concluded that the cannons could still be salvaged, but the ship itself was a total loss. Later, when someone recovered some of them, in 1679, there was a scandal where they tried to use them to settle a completely unrelated debt. In 2005, divers rediscovered the London. To protect it, port authorities even had to move the shipping lane, and a team of archaeologists got to work exploring it. That wreck is a big deal because it gives us real insights into English naval history. Visibility in the Thames estuary can be terrible. Sometimes you can't even see 1.5 feet in front of you. Working on the site is also super tough because it's in a crazy tidal environment, and a busy shipping lane, where huge cargo ships constantly pass by, is still near. So when a cannon suddenly appeared, stuck deep in the clay, it meant the conditions had to be absolutely perfect. Experts believe the find is from the Commonwealth era, and it's medium size, about 8 feet 6 inches long. It was part of a special set made specifically for the London and was placed on the ship's lower deck. Every single gun carriage on the London was one of a kind because all of its cannons came from different countries and different periods in naval history. Big cannons were really rare and crazy expensive to make since they needed tons of bronze or iron and had to be individually cast. That's why the Navy often grabbed cannons from captured rival ships, old shipwrecks, or decommissioned vessels. The new find is one of the clues that could eventually help scientists to solve the mystery of the London tragedy. So far, they've also found leather shoes, pieces of instruments, wooden tools, rope, and a compass. All these artifacts are like puzzle pieces to them. They still don't have enough evidence to be sure, but it looks like both the pipe and candles could have been sources of flames that set off a larger bang. Some workers made another amazing find at a flooded quarry in nearby southeast England, about 60 miles southeast of London. They stumbled upon the remains of a rare Elizabethan-era ship hundreds of yards away from the nearest coastline. Finding a ship from the late 1500s is a huge deal, because very few vessels from that time have survived. Studying it could help scientists answer some big questions about an important era in history, when England was becoming a major player in European trade. Today, the quarry site is about 1,000 feet from the sea, but back in the 1500s, it was actually part of the coastline. Archaeologists think the ship either wrecked on a rocky headland or someone dumped it there when it was too damaged to sail anymore. Scientists haven't identified it yet, but they studied over 100 pieces of its wooden hull, reading the tree rings, and found that it was built from English oak trees cut down between 1558 and 1580. At that time, Northern Europe was switching from the old clinker method, where the planks overlapped like fish scales, to the carvel style from the Mediterranean, where the planks are smooth and flush against each other, nailed to an internal frame. Old wood usually rots away pretty fast when it's exposed to air or water. But if it's buried under a thick, oxygen-free layer of mud or silt, it can survive for centuries. That's exactly what happened here. The team is using laser scanning and digital photography to document everything about the wreck. Once they finish their research, they plan to rebury the timbers under the silt in the Quarry Lake, so the ship can stay there safe for many more centuries to come. A team of archaeologists in Norway found a ship in an even more unexpected location, in a flat field. There's a hill nearby called Gel Mound. It's actually a huge burial monument that the Vikings themselves had built. The farmer who owns the field wanted to dig some drainage ditches, but first, he needed experts to check for anything important underground. Archaeologists used a high-resolution georadar attached to a tractor-like vehicle. When they scanned the field, they discovered that it used to be packed with burial mounds, at least 8 new ones nobody had ever found before. And beneath one of the mounds, the radar picked up the outline of a ship. Back in Viking times, ships were super valuable, so they only buried them with really important people. Scientists have only found 3 boat burials in all of Norway before, and this is the first new one in years. The team believes this ship is from Viking times, probably between the years 500 and 1000 CE. Because the burial mound above it got flat over time, the ship is now only about 1.6 feet below the ground. That's super close to the surface. It's around 66 feet long, and the radar showed that parts like the keel and the floorboards are still preserved. The archaeologists plan to explore more using non-invasive tools so they don't wreck anything by accident. If they need to, they'll start an excavation. Far away from Norway in the Namibian desert, a miner looking for gems accidentally found a legendary shipwreck almost 500 years old. The workers called in an archaeologist to check it out, and they thought it must have been the remains of a Portuguese trading ship, the Bom Jesus, that had mysteriously vanished in the 1500s. The Bom Jesus had left Lisbon loaded with treasures, aiming for India. But somewhere along the southern tip of Africa, a brutal storm slammed it into the Namibian coast. The ship smashed into rocks, broke apart, and disappeared under the waves. When archaeologists explored the wreck, they found parts of the ship scattered across the shore and buried under thick sand, which actually saved the remains from rotting away. They even discovered treasure, over 40 tons of cargo that had spilled out of the captain's chest underwater when the hull broke. There were cannons, swords, fabrics, tools sailors used to navigate by the stars, and most impressive of all, 1,845 copper ingots, solid pieces of metal weighing 16 to 17 tons in total. Scientists could even read the old trademarks stamped on them, revealing they were made by a mega-rich German trading company. And then there was the real jackpot. More than 2,000 gold and silver coins from all over the world, Portugal, Venice, France, and the Moorish states, plus 105 giant elephant tusks weighing about 2 tons. The tusks were likely on their way to become luxury goods like jewelry and fine carvings. DNA tests later showed the ivory came from West African forest and savanna elephants. They didn't find many bones though, which means the crew either managed to escape or were lost forever at sea.
You're running around the bus station with 20 bags, looking for your bus. You can't afford to miss it. The next one is leaving next year. Finally, you find the right bus and meet 19 other passengers you'll be traveling with through 18 countries for the next 70 days. Whew! Is there a bathroom on this thing? The new luxury bus will get on its first 12,500-mile journey from India's capital, New Delhi, to London in the United Kingdom in 2021. It'll be a hop-on, hop-off trip divided into 4 legs across Asia and Europe and operated by an Indian tour company. Each leg will last 12 to 22 days, and you can book them independently. Passengers will get to visit the sights of Southeast Asia, the Great Wall of China, the Silk Road in Central Asia, Gobi Desert, and Europe's largest cities. Guided tours, meals, and hotel stays will be included in the $20,000 bus fare. Only 20 tickets for the full journey will be available, but no worries, if you can't make it, the bus will follow the same route in reverse right after it gets to London. Myself, I want to see the bus do the English Channel. In the middle of the 20th century, bus routes from Europe to Asia were a common thing. In 1968, Australian-based businessman Andy Seward started a tour company that ran the longest bus route in the world. A luxury double-decker was traveling between 3 continents, connecting Australia, UK, and India. The bus, nicknamed Albert, set on its first journey on October 8, 1968, from Martin Place in Sydney, Australia. There were just 14 passengers aboard, including the founder of the company himself. The mobile luxury lounger had a separate dining lounge on board, an observation deck and individual beds, heating and music system, and the floors were carpet-lined. A journey from London to Calcutta cost around $3,000 in today's money, and the trip from Sydney to London was twice as expensive. Albert reached London after 130 days of traveling on September 17, 1969, and set on its return trip shortly after. After 8 years, it has successfully completed 16 trips, made 150 border crossings, and retired in London. The direct flight from Singapore to John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York is the longest regular non-stop passenger flight in the world. It covers around 9,500 miles in 18 hours 40 minutes. The plane has no economy class, but 67 business class seats and 94 premium economy. The world's shortest regular commercial flight only lasts 90 seconds, so no beverage service, sorry. It covers 1.7 miles between the Scottish islands of Westray and Papa Westray, off the north coast of Scotland. It has been running for around 50 years and has 3 regular pilots. The flight is mostly used by teachers, school students, and other locals, as well as tourists who travel here just for that. Hey, going through security takes longer than the flight does. The longest continuous cruise in the world lasts 245 days or 8 months. The Viking Sun's Ultimate World Cruise starts in London and travels around the globe to 6 continents and 111 ports before it gets back to the UK capital. It has enough room for 930 guests, but only 50 or so can afford to pay the $90,000 for the whole trip. Others join a certain segment of the trip. The German city of Wuppertal has an 8-mile-long network of suspended trains. The ride through all of its 20 stations takes 35 minutes at a maximum speed of 37 miles per hour at the height of a 3-story building. It has been running since 1901 and transports over 65,000 people daily with no traffic jams at all. In Cambodia, bamboo trains named Nori transport around a dozen passengers, livestock, or produce and other goods between small villages. A nori consists of a single queen-size platform and a lawnmower or boat engine that lets it speed up to 25 miles per hour. When 2 noris meet on the only line, the lighter one stops, the drivers and passengers disassemble it and let the bigger one pass. Then they put it back together, all in less than a minute. The escalators at all subway stations in Delhi have a unique sari guard feature. It tracks traditional ladies' wear, sari with loose ends, and prevents it from getting trapped by the moving stairs. There's a train route in Thailand that goes directly through a market. Meglong Market Railway has been around since 1905. The train is moving rather slowly, and vendors hear it long before it gets there. They quickly remove baskets of goods, their overhead tents, and umbrellas from the tracks. The train is passing by 8 times a day. So close you can reach it with your hands. Once it's gone, the market goes back on the track. One of the most popular tourist attractions in Madeira, Portugal, is the Monte Toboggan. It used to be the main means of transportation downhill starting from the 1850s. The ride in a basket attached to 2 wooden runners takes 10 minutes. There are 2 chauffeurs dressed in white with straw hats and rubber-soled shoes. They use the shoes to steer and brake the toboggan that speeds up to 30 miles per hour. Most planes are painted white to keep them cool. White reflects sunlight like no other color, both during the flight and on the runway. White doesn't fade, and you can see any faults on it easier. It also makes the plane lighter, which means using less fuel and cheaper to fly, and easier to sell as you can just slap a new logo on it. The Japanese SC Maglev is the fastest train in the world. The SC stands for superconducting, which does not necessarily describe the human train conductors collecting tickets and making announcements. The train uses magnetic levitation as it's silently moving above the tracks at the speed of 375 miles per hour. It only takes the crew 7 minutes to fully clean the inside of the cars, seats, restrooms, and washrooms, and the process has become a show for tourists. Well, maybe they are superconductors. Get equipped for any season with brand new Brightside merch. Click the link and grab your print. 40% of the subway system in New York City is above ground. If you take out and line up all the subway tracks, it would be enough to cover the distance between New York and Chicago. The New York subway is also the largest rapid transit system in the world by number of stations, with 472 stations in operation. Originally, green globes at subway entrance marked stations with a token booth open day and night, yellow, open with a part-time token booth, and red, stations closed all the time with no booth serving for exit only. Now, entrances with red globes are closed at night, and those with green ones are open 24/7. The yellow ones are history. There's an underground funicular in Istanbul, Turkey. It covers 1 mile and a height difference of 200 feet between the seaside and the famous pedestrian mall of Istanbul. The funicular was opened in 1874 and is the second oldest subway in the world after the London Underground. It has become so popular, they opened another line nearby. The longest train in the world that runs on a permanent basis consists of around 200 cars and stretches for 1.5 miles. It connects a large iron mining center with a port town in Mauritania. The journey lasts 16 to 20 hours, depending on how loaded the train is. It's perfectly normal for locals and tourists to jump on the iron train and spend the night among iron ore. The largest plane in the world is the Antonov AN-225. It was designed to transport a space plane and rocket boosters. It has the wingspan the height of the Statue of Liberty and 6 huge engines. Its maximum takeoff weight is 710 tons, or 6 blue whales. Iceland, Malta, Cyprus, Bhutan, Andorra, and Qatar are just a few countries that don't have a railway network. In some cases, it's because the construction would cost too much. Other reasons are poor weather conditions and a huge popularity of cars. The worst traffic jam in the world happened on the China National Highway 110 in 2010. It lasted 12 days and spread for 62 miles, with cars moving a half a mile per day. Thousands of drivers had to survive on instant noodles and water 10 times the normal price. The reason for the jam? Heavy trucks carrying construction materials into Beijing to build new roads and ease the traffic. Ironic, huh? School buses are yellow because this color instantly grabs your attention like no other. Scientists figure out you're way more likely to spot a yellow object than the same one painted red, even if it's not in front of you, with your peripheral vision. It makes yellow the safest option. Hey, that's why when I'm at the market, I go for the bananas first. In the 1930s, some planes had upper and lower berths with mattresses, pillows, and sheets, and curtains for extra comfort. The windows were much larger than in today's planes. There were real tables with food served on fine china dishes. In-flight entertainment could include live performances from singers and musicians, or movies shown on one huge screen. The smallest car in the world, POP-50, was around in the 1960s. It was as wide as 1.5 footsteps and about 3/4 as long as a standard side-by-side fridge. It had one headlight and couldn't reverse. The only way to turn it around was for you to use the handle on the side. Boy, it must have been great when you're dealing with tight parking spots.
This is the London Underground mosquito. Hank Marvin, pleasure to meet ya. To come across this buzzing little bloke in person, you'll need to travel to London and specifically head down into the subway. Chocker down here, isn't it? Because among 3,000 species of mosquitoes in the world, you'll only find this guy in the London subway. Not buzzing above ground near the stations, but down in the system. This mosquito is one of those rare cases when a unique species evolves in one particular place. They built the system back in the 1860s. It's the oldest subway in the world, mind you, and any mosquitoes that happened to be down there got shut off from the rest of the world. Save for the entrances and exits at stations, the subway system is a pretty sealed environment. The mosquitoes got trapped and evolved right there. And if you're annoyed by all mosquitoes in general, get this, the London Underground species is even bitier than others. While above-ground mosquitoes mostly feed on birds and grab a bite from you when given the rare chance, this one really likes to go for people. That's because it may do with the meals available to it, not birds, but mammals. That is, rats and humans. It's also unique in that it doesn't need blood to lay eggs like other mosquitoes and doesn't hibernate in the winter, so expect to swat at them year-round. Also a result of their being secluded to this underground tunnel system, no obvious seasonal temperature changes down there. This London type is so unique that it can't even crossbreed with other mosquito species. But beware, this species could be on the move. Infestations of particularly bitey mosquito populations have popped up in subway systems and sewers around the world, from Melbourne to New York. So let's head across the pond and meet another bug that lives only in the big city. Of over 1 billion ants running through the streets of Manhattan, scientists spotted a unique reddish-brown variety. That's about 120 ants for every person living in New York. These insects don't fit into any of the 13,000 ant species known to science. They're unique and only live in Manhattan between 63rd and 76th Streets. Scientists don't know how long these so-called Manhattans have evolved in isolation. They arrived in the US on ships from Europe and were cut off from the rest of the city's infrastructure. One thing's for sure, the species thrives on fast food, especially corn syrup. Because of its carbon-rich diet, the Manhattan was able to perfectly adapt to the dry, warm weather of the concrete jungle. Both ants and mosquitoes lived with dinosaurs. But don't get too excited about cloning a T-Rex by taking blood from a fossilized mosquito. We'll leave that myth to Hollywood plots. DNA is an incredibly fragile molecule. It breaks down quickly. So you'll need a mostly fresh sample from a recently departed dino. Chances are, we can't bring the dinosaurs back. But no need to. Dinosaurs live among us today. Everybody thinks an asteroid wiped out all the dinos 65 million years ago, but it didn't. Some survived and evolved into creatures you see every single day. Birds. In fact, the closest living relative to the mighty T-Rex is the chicken. Tarantulas in the wild keep tiny frogs as pets. Well, they don't feed them or take them for walks, but they do let the little froggies hang around with them. It's a win-win relationship. The frog gets a big hairy bodyguard from things that want to eat it, and the tarantula gets a protector for its nest. These tiny frogs feed on ants that try to eat the spider's eggs. There's no distinct border where our atmosphere ends and space begins. As you go up and further from the surface, the air gets thinner and thinner. At some point, it loses enough density that airplane wings stop working. That's about 60 miles up, and where scientists decided space officially starts. Yes, the cosmos is just an hour's drive away. The photoreceptors in your eyes are so sensitive, they can project an image when it's not even there. Ever stared at a bright light, moved your eyes to something else in the room, and you can still see the shape of that light bulb floating before your eyes? That's your eyes continuing to send visual information to your brain. A healthy human eye can see a candlelight up to 30 miles away. The Mariana Trench, the deepest known place on this planet that could fit Mount Everest with room to spare, goes only 6 miles down. The leaf slug eats so much algae, their body absorbs a part of the plant cells, chloroplasts, that let these little guys actually photosynthesize. Basically, this sea slug is part animal and part plant. When you dream, the props come from those older parts of the human mind that refer more to genetic memory than to your own personal ones. Smartphones and cars came into our lives in relatively recent times, and our cave people brains haven't gotten used to them enough. That's why you hardly ever see tech in your dreams. Okay, say you're one of the lucky few who's used a phone in their dream. Did you struggle to read or write a text? It's because the two regions of your brain that help you interpret language are mostly inactive when you're asleep. It's a good trick to know you're in a dream. You won't be able to read words or tell the time on a clock. Imagine if we could record a black hole on video. Watch it pull in and consume any matter that gets too close, even light itself. Oh, spaghettification. Now take this recording and play it backwards. This is what a theoretical white hole should be. The black hole's pushing away and matter spewing counterpart. If you've seen videos of whales surfacing, you'll notice they spray water from their blowholes. Only they don't. Whales are mammals like you and me. They breathe air. That's why they come to the surface. They release old air they've been holding in their lungs and take in new fresh air. That warm air coming from the blowhole meets with cold air around it and forms water droplets, giving the illusion that blowholes are like fountains.
Get equipped for any season with brand new Brightside merch. Click the link and grab your print.
You can tell a whale's type by looking at its blowhole. If it has two nostril-looking holes, it's a baleen whale, the kind with teeth that look more like toothbrush bristles. One blowhole means it's a toothed whale, which includes dolphins and orcas. The mighty megalodon was over half the length of a blue whale, the largest creature that's ever lived in all of Earth's history. Scientists did a computer calculation of a meg's bite force and came up with something like 18 tons per square inch. That's over 10 times stronger than a great white shark's, and enough to crush whale bones like a grape. Thanks to cell regeneration, you replace your skin entirely every month, your blood every 4 months, your liver 500 days, and you make yourself a whole new skeleton every 10 years. Scientists think we yawn to get more oxygen to the brain. When you get bored or tired, you don't breathe as deeply, and it starves the brain a little. The lungs expanding and stretching the surrounding muscles also helps wake the body up. Cicadas are totally unique on this planet in that they have no natural enemies. Since they come out of their underground shelters every 13 or 17 years, no other animal can depend on them as a food source. Scientists believe that early humans lost their fur so they wouldn't overheat while hunting. We instead evolved to store fat to keep warm, which is why your head is covered in long, thick hair. There's no fat on your scalp. A teaspoon of neutron star material weighs 10 million tons. That'd be like squishing millions of Earths into a ball the size of Manhattan. If you could stand on the surface of a neutron star, your body would be instantly squished down and spread into a layer 1 atom thick. Yep, you'd be two-dimensional, just like a cartoon. Get this, 1,000,000 seconds is about 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 30 years. 1 billion steps would take you 15 times around the Earth's equator. And if you started counting from 1 to 1 billion right now, it would take you 95 years to finish. Okay, let's get started. 1, 2. 1 dog year equals 7 human years. That's an oversimplified and widespread myth. Aging in dogs and cats can depend on the breed, size, and their age. For example, 1 year for most dogs equals about 15 human years. That jumps to 24 at age 2 and slows down to around 4 more human years with each birthday. It then speeds up yet again after their first 6 years, especially for larger breeds. Most animals have tails, so why don't humans? It's because we started walking on two legs. Tails help with balance, but when your body mass is upright, with that 10-pound head sitting on top, you don't need another appendage at the other end to balance it all out. If you're ever on a plane and the landing feels like it was accidentally rough, it was probably done on purpose. A plane's wings produce more lift when they're closer to the ground, pushing it back up into the air. The best way to prevent this is with a firm landing that puts the wheels on the runway as soon as possible. Harder landings also give the wheels more traction on rainy or snowy runways. If your second toe is longer than the big one, you're pretty special. Only 1 in 10 people have this so-called Morton's toe. In ancient Greece, a foot with Morton's toe was considered a sign of beauty. By the way, the Statue of Liberty has it too. Contrary to popular belief, the tongue is not the strongest muscle in your body. That would be your jaw muscle. Plus, the tongue isn't technically a muscle, it's 8 of them woven together. Structurally, it's very similar to an octopus arm. Nope, that wasn't a slip. An octopus does have arms, not tentacles. And they only have 6 arms. The other 2 are legs. Arms have suction cups all the way down their length. Tentacles only have suction cups at the end, and that's what squids have 2 of. If you could open your head and poke your brain, you wouldn't feel anything. It might be the powerhouse of the nervous system, but it doesn't contain any sensory receptors for contact stimuli, aka it doesn't feel pokes and prods. Horse hooves and rhino horns are made of the same stuff as your hair and nails, keratin. Rhino horns curve back because the keratin in the front grows faster than in the back. One of the oldest tips out there is to run from a crocodile in zigzags, since it's hard for the animal to turn around quickly and follow you. This is just a complete myth. Just run in a straight line as fast as you can. Don't bother climbing a tree either. Crocs can climb those too. Don't ever practice your dunking skills on Comet 67P. Its gravity is so weak, your jump would surpass its escape velocity. That's the minimum speed you need to escape the pull of gravity, like rockets blasting off Earth. On this comet, you jump up and go floating off into space. There's a species of giant earthworms that can grow as long as your leg. They live specifically in the Palouse prairie lands of Idaho and Washington. Oh, and these ginormo worms smell like lilies. Dinosaurs had fleas the size of cockroaches. Well, they weren't technically fleas because they couldn't jump high like the modern day ones. But they could get their mouth parts through dino skin. If you swallow gum, it doesn't stay in your stomach for 7 years. That's a myth. Sure, your saliva and stomach acid can't break it down, but the muscles of your digestive tract move it along, and it makes its exit in a day or 2. Mosquitoes can live perfectly fine on flower nectar instead of your blood, and it's only the females that bite humans, and they do it because they need a protein found in blood to produce eggs. The largest flower in the world also happens to be the stinkiest. With a bloom about 3 feet across and weighing roughly 15 pounds, the corpse lily smells like rotting meat. Sharks are the only fish that can blink with both eyes, but it's not to clean or hydrate them. They blink to protect their eyes while biting into their lunch. The average cumulus cloud, that's the big poofy kind, weighs just over 1 million pounds. That's the weight of about 100 fully grown elephants floating above your head on a cloudy day. If you shout in space, nobody will hear you. It's because there are no molecules in the vacuum of space for the sound waves to travel through. Dark and light look way more contrasted on the moon. On our planet, the atmosphere diffuses sunlight, so objects remain a little illuminated in the shadows. The moon has a next to nothing super thin atmosphere, so shadows are blacker. But when there's light, it shines on the moon much stronger because of its reflective dust. We went to the moon before wheels were added on suitcases. That second giant leap for our species happened a couple years later. The light stars emit is constant and steady. The Earth's atmosphere interferes and makes it look as if they're twinkling when they're not at all. Information moves along nerves at about 200 miles per hour, getting from one place to another in a matter of milliseconds. That's why you jerk your hand back so fast when you accidentally touch that hot pizza pan. Electrical sockets look different around the world, but they all have one thing in common, at least two holes. It's because electricity must flow through a circuit, or a kind of circle. The current flows from your breaker box to the hot hole on the right, passes through the appliance, say your hairdryer or lamp, and then comes back to the neutral left hole. A blue whale's heart is the size of a golf cart and can weigh 400 pounds. Your heart weighs 10 ounces. That makes a blue whale's heart 640 times larger than a human's. But the one with the biggest heart compared to body size amongst all animals, it's your loyal, loving dog. People getting their picture taken during Victorian times said prunes instead of cheese. Shaping the mouth this way apparently gave them a nobler look. Plus, it could take 15 to 30 minutes just to take one photo. Imagine holding a smile for that long. Cleopatra lived closer to the release of the first iPhone than to the building of the Great Pyramids. When the first dinosaur fossils were discovered in the 1670s, people had no idea what they were. Their best guess, the bones belonged to an extinct species of giant humans. Fossils also show that 40 million years ago, penguins were the size of a kangaroo. The world's largest waterfall is underwater. This is the Denmark Strait Cataract, where cold, denser water from the Nordic seas flows under warm water from the Erminger Sea. Along the way, it falls 11,500 feet over an underwater ridge. That's more than 3 times the height of the tallest waterfall on land. Australia is wider than the moon. Check the numbers. The land down under is almost 2,500 miles across. The moon, a little over 2,100. It took Rubik's Cube creator Erno Rubik 1 month to solve the cube after he created it in the early 70s. The world record today is 3.47 seconds. Lightning is 4 times hotter than the sun. A single bolt can toast over 100,000 slices of bread. Pineapples have a digestive enzyme in them, so when you eat a pineapple, it eats a little bit of you too. That's why it burns a little in your mouth when you bite into one. No worries though, your stomach will always come out the winner in this match. Disposable chopsticks are connected at the top, so you know they haven't been used before. You're supposed to break that connected top off and lay your used chopsticks on it so they don't touch the table. The main function of eyebrows is to protect your eyes from sweat and dirt. That's why they grow toward your temples, to direct moisture to the sides, instead of straight down. But they also protect your eyes from too much sunlight. Without brows, our species probably would have evolved to have really long, thick eyelashes. An average person will grow 600 miles of hair in a lifetime. That's about the distance from New York City to Dayton, Ohio. Point Nemo in the Pacific Ocean is the most remote place on our planet. It's more than 1,600 miles from any coast. If you traveled there, you'd be much closer to astronauts on the International Space Station than to any human on Earth. The ISS orbits just 250 miles above the surface. Watching paint dry is a profession. You sit in a chair in front of a freshly painted wall, and, well, you get it. Your job is to track how the paint texture changes, where it cracks, and give a detailed report based on your thrilling observations. When people used sundials in ancient times, the shadow of the sun went from the left to the right in the northern hemisphere, and vice versa in the southern hemisphere. The first mechanical clocks were invented in the north, so they go with what we now know as clockwise. If it had been in the south, the directions could have been switched today. The body's fastest muscles are in the eye, and the blink of an eye is about 1/10 of a second. You do that 20,000 times a day. Next time someone says, "I'll get it done in a jiffy," remember this: scientists say a jiffy is the time light needs to travel 1 centimeter, about the width of your fingernail, in a vacuum. Human fingertips are so sensitive, they can feel ridges in an object, even when they're just 13 nanometers deep. A nanometer is 1/millionth of a millimeter, and a millimeter is about the length of a grain of sand. In 1992, a cargo ship lost a crate with 28,000 rubber duckies in the North Pacific. These toys still appear on coasts around the world, even over in the Atlantic.
The authorities in a town in northwestern Poland decided to build an observation tower in a public park. Nothing special about that, right? It wasn't until a local archaeologist started digging. It seemed that he had found remains of a fort, but not just any fort. The legendary Jomsborg, or as people also call it, the Viking medieval New York. It's not unusual for Viking finds to pop up in this area. Archaeologists have suspected for a long time that the Polish island near Germany could be the site of the legendary city, and the locals believe in this too. Every year they hold the continent's biggest Viking festival there. People dress up and reenact the Vikings' way of life. The time period I'm talking about is the 10th century. Scholars believe Jomsborg thrived back then, if it was even real, and that's a big if. The mystery has been going on for more than half a millennium. The two most important questions troubling historians are whether the Viking stronghold was real and where it was located. The first historical records that mention the town can be traced back to the 12th century. Recently, a golden disc appeared in Sweden. It contained the names of Jomsborg and Harold Bluetooth. Does the man's last name sound familiar? That's because the Bluetooth technology we use today was named after him. He was a Danish king who apparently ruled over Jomsborg as well, and historians know he lived in the 10th century, right around the time the Viking legendary city reached its peak. All the historical sources we have lack one thing: the city's exact location. Ancient texts describe Jomsborg as a vibrant trading post that grew around a fortress. It had thousands of residents and a pier for ships to dock. This settlement should be somewhere along the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. Just the Polish section of the coastline is more than 4 times longer than the Grand Canyon. The city could be anywhere within the medieval Wendland. Today, this region is split between Germany and Poland, and it's called Pomerania. Luckily for archaeology buffs, there are clues. The Polish city with the newly discovered fort lies near a lagoon. According to ancient sources, the legendary city had room for hundreds of ships. Sagas put the total number of vessels at 360. These are Old Norse epics in prose. A lagoon is the perfect place to moor a large fleet. The waters here are calm. There are no big waves like in the open sea. Speaking of the sea, some historians believe that the city now lies underwater. According to them, the site was located off the northwest coast of Eustom Island. Today, this area is submerged under the Baltic Sea. Let's say Jomsborg really existed. Who lived there? The name of the inhabitants is not very imaginative: Jomsvikings. These people are just as mysterious as their fabled city. They are mentioned in sagas and legends. And there are a couple of rune stones, those are raised stones with runic letters, that mention battles they took part in. Runes were a writing system used by Germanic peoples, including the Vikings, before they adopted the Latin script. And that's pretty much it. There's no hard archaeological evidence that would prove Jomsvikings ever existed. If these myths and legends turn out to be true, then Jomsborg really resembled New York. All nationalities with historical ties to the region lived there: Germans, Slavs, and Vikings. Now keep in mind that a Viking wasn't a nationality but more of a profession. The hotspot of Viking activity was present-day Sweden and Denmark. A lot of Vikings had Scandinavian origins, but not all of them. In terms of genes, they were a mixed bunch. Scientists even found evidence that some Vikings came from southern Europe, but none of them wore those helmets with horns. We owe that image to 19th century operas. The real Vikings had simple iron helmets with a prominent nose guard. The Jomsvikings were sort of a brotherhood, and in any tight-knit community, members had to obey certain rules. One of them stated that you had to be brave. This meant that if your opponent is not bigger than you and didn't have better fighting tools, you weren't allowed to flee the scene. Sounds a bit far-fetched, but this was an actual Viking rule of conduct. Also, Vikings could leave the city for only 3 days. Any longer, absence required permission from the elders, and they wouldn't allow you to have a conflict with anyone from the Brotherhood. Forgive and forget seemed to have been the Jomsvikings' motto. These rules sound fair, but Jomsborg didn't last long. It only existed for some 85 years. That's the length of the average lifespan in the European Union today. Basically, 1 human generation. In fact, the whole Viking Age lasted shortly, just over 2 centuries in total. But this was long enough to create the legend of the Norsemen. They are all over our popular culture. There was a TV show, Vikings, and the movie, The Northman. Even the animated movie How to Train Your Dragon had a little Viking as the main hero. And most of them mention a place from Norse mythology, Valhalla. Now, if Jomsborg is semi-legendary, Valhalla is 100% fiction. It is the Hall of Fallen Warriors. Remember how the Jomsvikings had to honor a code of behavior? They did so in the hope of earning their place in Valhalla. This was a splendid place. The people there feast on boar meat every day, under a roof made of shields. Every Viking's dream, right? That's not all. They get into scrimmages with each other on a daily basis. But what exactly motivated the Vikings to take up a life of seafaring? There is no simple answer, but this seems to be a rags to riches story. Scandinavian people traded fur with other European nations. From them, they found out about the riches that lay to the south of their homeland. And they also knew that European leaders didn't always get along well with each other. So why not take advantage of this and earn extra cash on the side? The Vikings' motivation seems pretty modern. The very first raid was carried out by Norwegian Vikings. They sailed across the North Sea to northeast England. Europeans were shocked by the boldness of these raiders from the north. The Viking Age was about to begin. The Norsemen soon realized that European nations were ready to pay a hefty sum to avoid their visits. At the beginning of the 11th century, the English paid the Vikings more than $300,000 in today's money to leave them alone. There was even a special word for this tax. The influx of all this wealth made the Vikings' appetite only grow bigger. But this was all about to change in 1066, possibly the most important date in English history. That year, the last great Viking king went to England. However, he couldn't find victory at Stamford Bridge. Yes, the place where the Chelsea Football Club plays its matches today. After the Norwegian king lost, the number of raids decreased. The Europeans were better equipped to defend themselves. The Viking Age slowly came to an end. But this didn't mean that the Vikings were gone forever. They stayed in Iceland for 400 years. The island was largely uninhabited before they came in the 9th century. And in England, the Vikings left their trace in place names. Every town that ends in by was first settled by these Scandinavians. There are around 2,000 place names across Great Britain and Ireland that can be linked to the Vikings. And can you guess which part of France has the most Viking-related toponyms? The name says it all: Normandy. The mouth of the River Seine is where most Danish Vikings settled in the 9th century. From there, they sent several raiding parties to Paris itself.
Is the Big Apple getting a little too heavy for its own good? A recent study revealed that New York City is sinking. And get this, it's all because of those towering skyscrapers. Apparently, the whole event is called subsidence, which is when the Earth's surface settles bit by bit, or suddenly sinks. Soft sediments shifting and the weight of the city itself are the culprits behind this sinking sensation. Now, don't get too alarmed. The study found that New York is sinking at a rate of 0.04 to 0.07 inches per year. Sure, that doesn't sound like much, but there are parts of the city that are sinking even faster than that. This sinking situation could cause some trouble for the city, especially since it's already pretty low-lying and home to over 8 million people. So it's important that local authorities come up with some strategies to tackle the growing flood risk and rising sea levels. Although, I'm not sure building giant seawalls is the way to go. We might need to get a little more creative than that. Geologists want to make sure we're all aware that building more high-rises near the coast, rivers, or lakes could contribute to future flood risks. So we really need to think twice before we start constructing skyscrapers left and right. In recent studies, scientists calculated the total mass of all the buildings in New York City, over 1 million of them, and it adds up to a whopping 1.68 trillion pounds. Talk about a heavy load. Now, they didn't include the weight of the roads, sidewalks, bridges, and other paved areas, so you can only imagine how much more weight is added to the city. But hey, even with these limitations,
The researchers did a pretty good job of accounting for the complex geology beneath New York, including the sand, silt, clay deposits, and good old bedrock. They found out that certain types of soil, like clay and artificial fill, are more prone to subsidence. On the other hand, bedrock stays pretty firm and keeps those skyscrapers in place. So at least we don't have to worry about the Empire State Building taking a dive anytime soon. Comparing their fancy models with satellite data, the researchers created a map of the city showing where the sinking is happening. And guess what? The increased urbanization and all that groundwater pumping and draining are only making things worse. It's high time we start protecting our resources, don't you think? I wouldn't start packing my bags just yet. New York isn't the only sinking city out there, you know. Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, is facing some serious sinking action too. In fact, parts of it could be underwater by 2050. That's like a real-life Atlantis situation. Over 30 million people in Jakarta are now deciding if they should relocate the entire city. If there's a city out there we should worry about sinking, that's Venice for sure. But why is it so eager to take a dive, you might ask? Well, let me tell you the complex truth. You see, Venice decided to set up shop on a marshy lagoon with shoddy foundations. As time went by, the ground underneath just couldn't hold it together and started compacting like a squished marshmallow. On top of that, the city's been slurping up groundwater like it's going out of style or something. The cherry on top of this mushy cake is that the sea levels have also been slowly rising. And guess what? Those sneaky plate tectonics are having a laugh by shoving the Adriatic plate under the Apennine Mountains, giving Venice an extra push downward. Someone had the bright idea to stop pumping groundwater, thinking they could stop the sinking shenanigans. But hold your gondolas. A new study revealed that the sinking hasn't completely stopped, just slowed down a bit. It turns out the whole area is tilting ever so slightly to the east, with Venice perched on the slightly higher end. You must be wondering how much Venice sinks in a year, right? Brace yourself for this shocking revelation. It's sinking at a rate of about 0.04 to 0.07 inches a year, similar to New York. At this pace, in the next 20 years, it could sink a whopping 3 inches below sea level. To avoid turning into a Venetian fishbowl, locals are frantically building special barriers to keep the water from crashing into the lagoon. But don't hold your breath, because this project has had more delays than you'd expect. Oh, and have you noticed that charming old-style vibe in Venice? It's not just because they're fans of the vintage look. Those salty waters have been wreaking havoc on the buildings, thanks to the water levels constantly breaching the original damp proofing. Now the water's cozying up to the masonry, and the ground floors of many apartments are no longer safe enough to live in. Now, when will Venice take a dive into the abyss? It's hard to say for sure. Subsidence and rising sea levels are as slow and unpredictable as a turtle in a marathon. But experts have playfully warned that if things continue as they are, Venice could be doing the backstroke beneath the waves by 2100. Fear not, though. They're doing their best to protect this floating gem of history and culture from becoming a Hollywood disaster flick. So don't cancel that Venice day trip just yet. New Orleans has a peculiar watery situation going on too. You see, this lively place was initially built just a smidge above sea level, and now it's gradually sinking. Back in the day, when an area of the city called the French Quarter was just popping up, folks had to make do with what they had. They scored the best land they could find, but it was only about 10 feet above sea level. And let's not forget, the rest of the city is as flat as a pancake, with the areas around the French Quarter being just a hair lower. Now, even though they knew they were up against some soggy odds, the resourceful New Orleans residents did their best to elevate their houses above the flood-prone land they chose as their home. There's more. The ground beneath New Orleans is as wobbly as a plate of Jell-O. Architects had to keep things short and sweet because they feared the soil couldn't handle the weight of taller structures. They played it safe, sticking to 2 or 2.5 stories. Here's where it gets interesting. The city installed a fancy drainage system in the 1900s, thinking it would solve their water woes. And while it did help with the marshes and all, it inadvertently sucked the life out of the soil. Yep, the ground was left high and dry, without enough sediment and water to keep it steady. As a result, those former marshes sank as if they were in a quicksand competition. By the 1930s, things got even more topsy-turvy. 1/3 of the city was below sea level, and by the time Hurricane Katrina made its grand entrance, that number skyrocketed to around 50%. Oh, and here's the icing on the cake. Sea levels decided to join the party, rising faster than a helium balloon. So now, not only is New Orleans sinking, but the surrounding area is also at various degrees below sea level. So, what can we do about all these sinking cities? Well, for instance, we could manage our water consumption a bit better. We can't just keep sucking groundwater out of the earth like there's no tomorrow. We've got to find new ways to quench our urban centers' thirst. Think about it. We could purify surface waters, or even turn salty seawater into a sweet solution. Of course, we'll need a boatload of energy to make it all work. Speaking of great urban water management, let me tell you about a town in Denmark called Nye. These guys have got it all figured out. They collect rainwater and use it to supply their toilets and washing machines. Talk about resourcefulness. Now that's what I call a splash of genius.
Well, looky here. It's New York City, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. Hong Kong on the Hudson, the greatest city in the world. New York, New York, the city so nice they named it twice. All right, I'll stop. You thought you knew this city so well, but underneath all that glitz and glamour is a facade, literally. New York is populated with some of the most iconic urban buildings in the world and home to some of the most unique and famous towers. Who would have known that New York was a front for fake buildings? And the cool thing is that there are plenty to search for. Okay, I'm adding that to my bucket list. So the question is, why do they put these fake buildings all over New York? The city is one of the most vibrant places in the world and requires many infrastructures to keep the city in motion. That means having many industrial structures and buildings in every major district. New York is charming for the design and the buildings. Imagine having industrial structures right next to your favorite pizza parlor or hot dog stand. The designers thought ahead and decided to disguise those industrial infrastructures as fake buildings. They blend with the city so well that they don't stand out. They look like your good old apartment or housing unit with a front door, real-life windows, and even charming balconies where people would hang out. The only thing is that there's nothing behind the facade and no one is allowed inside. So, where in the world can you find these fake buildings? For starters, one of the most popular fake buildings is in Brooklyn. At 58 Joralemon Street, you can find a very typical neighborhood. But between the buildings stands a brick building with a slightly deeper shade than the rest. It has bright open windows that blend in with the rest of the buildings in the neighborhood, except that they're blacked out. At first glance, you might not think of it as anything, but if you pay close attention, the building looks like a glitch from a video game. It was built in 1847, way before New York was considered glamorous. Originally, it was meant to be a regular building, but in 1908, they converted it into a fake building. Don't think you can just try to break in. Even if you could, it's pointless, because it's part of a ventilation fan for the subway. It also serves as an emergency exit for some of the surrounding buildings. Actually, throughout New York, many fake buildings exist to disguise the subway vents for the smoke to escape. all the way to 415 Bruckner Boulevard, the Bronx, this townhouse was designed by the Switzer Group, which is an interior architect company. It's not as charming as the one at 58 Joralemon Street, but it serves a similar purpose: to hide an electric substation for New York's utility company. The city needs these substations to reduce the high-voltage electricity to a lower voltage so it can be distributed locally. Having a building like this popping out of the middle of your neighborhood isn't exactly the smartest way to attract people to the Bronx. That's why the fake townhouse facade is the perfect camouflage. Now, some of these fake buildings don't really hit the mark and stick out like a sore thumb. The people of Manhattan describe the Mulberry Square infrastructure as a complete clunker. After plenty of redesigns and back to the drawing board meetings, the result is still not pretty. The locals compare it to a concrete box. They created windows without glass, which doesn't allow the building to blend in with the rest of the neighborhood. But it beats a typical subway ventilation plant either way. There are just so many places to visit and cross off your bucket list. But if you live in China, you can literally stay in the country and visit many iconic cities around the world. The replica cities began when the Chinese economy started booming in the early 90s. They wanted the lifestyle of the rich and famous without wanting to leave their country. They can be comfortable eating their local food and get the feeling of being abroad. The Chinese province of Guangdong has an identical copy of the historical Australian alpine village Hallstatt. The real Hallstatt is centuries old and one of the most charming places to discover. The local people of Hallstatt also had no idea that their home was being built in China. Some people thought that this was controversial, probably because it cost around $940 million to build it. Paris is undoubtedly one of the most charming cities you could ever visit. Its rich history and vibrant culture are enough to catch the first plane to go there. For residents of Tianducheng, that's something they can do anytime they want. The city is also known as Sky City and has a replica of the Eiffel Tower that looks eerily like the iconic one in Paris and built buildings to match the city's visual charm. One of the main things that will break the charm is the farmland surrounding the city. There's barely anyone there, and the streets are always empty, very un-Paris-like. Still, you can find some nice fountains and statues scattered along the streets to give it some spirit. There's laundry hung everywhere, even on the trees. The picturesque fountains are dry and many apartments are empty. Only a few stores are open for business. Even though this looks like a fake city, it's quite real. Some people live here because it's more affordable than other places. 2 hours away from this town is another version of Paris's Pont Alexandre III and a carbon copy of London's Tower Bridge, but with 4 towers instead of 2. Hey, such a bargain! You can also visit the closest thing to Italy, but this time you can go shopping. Florentia Village is an outlet mall that offers an array of shops to lose yourself. The good thing is that this was built by an Italian developer to capture the essence of an Italian village. It has fountains, canals, and mosaics for proper aesthetics. It began in 2011 and has more than 200 shops with many Italian brands and British, US, and Chinese brands as well. The place is so popular that it gets between 10,000 and 25,000 visitors per day. China also has other replica towns that put you in a mini Manhattan called the Yujiapu Financial District. The developer's goal was to make this place the financial center of the world. It was complete with the right landmarks, like the Rockefeller and Lincoln Centers, but the project was halted in 2019, leaving it mainly empty. You can find a typical English town with cobbled streets, Victorian homes, and restaurants that make Thames Town. This place was meant to recreate a European lifestyle fantasy without leaving Shanghai. China also has a Dutch town that has some elements of Amsterdam with windmills and famous canals. They even decided to copy some of the landmarks, like the Netherlands Maritime Museum. Here's a bonus story of Lebanon's thinnest building built out of a dispute. It's the story of 2 brothers who both inherited unequal plots of land. One of the brothers happened to get a very thin plot of land and couldn't help but be jealous of his brother's nice plot of land. He wasn't pleased. Both of the lands overlook the Mediterranean Sea in a lively neighborhood of Beirut. So it's no wonder that both brothers couldn't agree on how they should develop their lands. It was obvious that the brother with the most land could build a proper building. The other brother had to improvise. He decided to obstruct his brother's property by constructing a thin building enough to only fit 14 feet at its widest and 2 feet at its most narrow. It was constructed in 1954, and the locals of the area know it as the Grudge. The crazy thing is that the place was once habitable with many visitors enjoying their stay. It's not easy to live there, but it's part of living the experience. The building is still standing, but is empty. Wow, every morning 8.5 million people wake up in New York City. But the Big Apple doesn't belong only to humans. This is the city of ants. There are 17 billion of them here. They live in houses, hide in the grass, crawl under asphalt, and climb trees. For every New Yorker, there's a sneaker box filled with ants. City ants are more fortunate than their forest cousins. They don't have any need to look for food. Millions of people leave behind tons of hot dog crumbs, pizza slices, and coffee drips. Insects just have to wait for a lunch break in an office building. Then they gather around benches in the park or cafe tables. A lot of food is waiting for them there. Over 1 billion. That's how many ants are running through the streets and parks of Manhattan. And in this ocean of insects, scientists have been able to spot tiny reddish-brown creatures. These insects don't fit into any of the 13,000 ant species known to science. They're unique and only live in Manhattan. Their kingdom is between 63rd and 76th Streets. Scientists don't know how long the Manhattans have evolved in isolation. They arrived in the U.S. on ships from Europe and were cut off from the rest of the city's infrastructure. But why go anywhere else if there's enough food? The Manhattan loves fast food, especially corn syrup. Because of such a diet, the insect's body has an increased carbon content. This isn't a problem for the ant, though. Carbon helps it adapt to the dry, warm weather of the concrete jungle. Around 20% of New York City is parks and green spaces. White-footed mice live in these places. Scientists have found out that the mice that live in New York have evolved. They're different from their village relatives. These changes are genetical. It's caused by the diet of white-footed rodents that feed on human food waste. For example, New York mice need enlarged livers to process fatty acids from fast food. Central Park in New York is almost twice the size of the Principality of Monaco. A unique centipede is only found in this green area. The creature, called Hoffman's dwarf centipede, doesn't grow any longer than 0.4 inches. It lives in heaps of dry plants and runs on 41 pairs of legs. This crustacean, measuring only a bit more than 0.3 inches, is called the Socorro isopod. It's one of the rarest animals on the planet. The creature can only be found in a small thermal spring near Socorro, New Mexico. The isopod lives in the water as warm as 90 degrees Fahrenheit and covered with a layer of algae. These are ideal conditions for the creature. To get to Mobile Cave, you'd have to rappel 65 feet down. That's the height of a 4-story building. After that, you'd crawl through narrow passages and swim along a canal with cold water. Sunlight can't get into the cave. The air is poisoned by vapors of ammonia and hydrogen sulfide. This extreme place has been isolated from the outside world for 5.5 million years. A unique ecosystem has formed in this toxic atmosphere. Of all the animals that live there, 33 species of millipedes, scorpions, spiders, and leeches can't be found anywhere else on Earth. These creatures are mostly blind and colorless. Well, why would you need eyes and disguise if you live in complete darkness? Mobile's coolest guy is the venomous centipede. Scientists have nicknamed this animal the King of the Cave. It doesn't grow more than 2 inches, but for this world, it's a giant. The blind salamander would feel great in the company of strange animals from Mobile, but these little monsters are separated by the ocean and thousands of miles. The Mobile Cave is located in Romania, where these beauties live only in Texas. Their home is an underground body of water in the San Marcos area. These salamanders grow to be 5 inches long. The name makes it pretty clear that the animal is blind. It does have eyes, but they're pretty much useless. This doesn't stop the salamander from being a skilled snail and shrimp hunter. It senses other animals by feeling the underwater waves they create while moving. The Scottish wildcat lives in the north of Scotland. This animal is different from domestic cats, which love sleeping on the couch. Unlike them, it's a perfect hunter. The creature is 25% larger than the average cat. It's muscular and long-legged. The wildcat's tail is blunt and fluffy, covered in black rings with a black tip on the end. The quokka is called the world's happiest animal. Just look at its smile. This fluffy animal seems to always be ready for a photo shoot. Quokkas are only found in Australia. Around 10,000 animals live on Rottnest Island and several other locations. The creature's cute smile is an evolutionary trait. An open mouth helps it breathe and regulates its body temperature. Oh, by the way, if you try to feed a quokka, you'll have to pay a fine of more than $200. This baby will feel comfortable even if you put it on your little finger. The animal lives only on the island of Madagascar. Scientists have found just 2 tiny reptiles, a male and a female. The researchers have named the nano-chameleon Brookesia nana. It's a mystery to them why it doesn't grow larger than a sunflower seed. The next animal on the list also lives only in Madagascar. Locals call this creature Ai. The unusual lemur spends most of its life in trees and leads a nocturnal lifestyle. This might explain why it looks so tired. Even though the Ai is a lemur, its teeth are like those of a rodent. Its claws resemble sloth's claws, and its body looks like that of a monkey. The animal's fingers and toes are especially frightening. They're long and thin, with pointy claws. Get equipped for any season with brand new Brightside merch. Click the link and grab your print. This is a giraffe with its trademark long neck. A zebra is grazing nearby. Black and white stripes on its body help the animal reflect sunlight during the day and keep it warm at night. But what if you combine these animals? No need, nature has done this work for you. The okapi looks like a giraffe with a short neck, horse body, and zebra stripes on its legs. The okapi has a long tongue. Males have small giraffe horns on their heads. You can only meet these unusual animals in the African rainforest. If you decide to travel around Africa afterward, you must visit the Ethiopian highlands. That's where you see unique gelada monkeys. And no, they're not named after the Italian ice cream. That's gelato. Don't mix that up. Males look like rock stars from the 70s. They're bright and have cool hair. But don't mess with these animals. They aren't too friendly. Geladas spend most of their time on the ground, and the main part of their diet is the grass they collect during the day. Scientists believe that geladas are the remaining members of an ancient gang of critters. It lived millions of years ago in vast spaces from South Africa to India. Now, imagine people the size of the Statue of Liberty living next to us. Sounds like science fiction. But for the animal world, this is reality. The world's smallest tortoise species, the speckled tortoise, doesn't grow more than 4 inches long. But the Galapagos Islands are home to giant tortoises that reach the length of 5 feet. They also weigh like a sports bike. The largest of them had an incredible weight of 1,000 pounds. The giant Galapagos tortoise lives for 100 years and sleeps 16 hours a day. Due to its slow metabolism, the animal may not eat or drink water for a whole year. Millions of years ago, lizards from South America climbed onto a log. Sea waves carried the log to the Pacific Ocean. The lizards traveled hundreds of miles and ended up on the Galapagos Islands. They had to evolve to adapt to new conditions. Scientists believe this is how the marine iguanas appeared. These unique animals look like dangerous dragons, but in fact, they feed on plants and are totally harmless. Iguanas spend most of their lives in water. To get rid of sea salt that accumulates in the body, these animals literally sneeze salt. Achoo! The lyrebird lives only in southeastern Australia and the island of Tasmania. The bird has such a strange name because of its tail. It looks like a lyre, a stringed instrument of the ancient Greeks. Lyrebirds are known for their ability to imitate other birds, and not only them. The bird copies animal screams, human voices, chainsaw noises, car and fire alarms, and even the click of a camera. About 12,000 years ago, a salt lake appeared on one of Palau's islands. Today, it's called Jellyfish Lake. This 1,500 by 500-foot reservoir is home to 5 million golden jellyfish. These unique creatures swim to the west shore of the lake every morning. There, jellyfish wait for the sunrise. Then, all day long, they follow the sun. Algae lives in the tissues of the jellyfish, feeding them with energy. These algae can't live without sunlight. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click